So it's like,
All right,
we're ready to get paid now.
we will call the council meeting to order. Everybody stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, take the roll.
Mayor O'Connor,
Here.
Morissette,
Here.
Wakefield,
Here.
Knudsen,
Here.
Kennedy,
Here.
Bruck,
Here.
Hall.
Here.
All right, first up are comments and suggestions from citizens present. This is your opportunity, anybody here in the audience, to comment on any issue that you would like to talk about other than what might be on the agenda already tonight. And if you would, please come up, identify yourself and your address. Keep your comments brief. Try not to repeat comments that other people have made. And I think that's it. Anybody have any comments? Any comments? Any comments? Any comments? Hearing none, we'll move on. Close that portion of the agenda. Presentations, we have a retirement. Sergeant Peter Schultz from the police force is retiring. Chief?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Sergeant Pete Schultz, after 32 years of service, will be retiring at the end of this month from the police department. Sergeant Schultz grew up in the city of Hudson, graduate of Hudson High School, attended UW River Falls, also the Army Reserves, and then came back home to serve his community for the last 32 years. So he spent the majority, over 20 years of his career on patrol. He also served us in the detective division and as a detective sergeant. He was also a police school resource officer for the high school during his career. So, do you have anything you want to say?
Well, it's been a fun ride. I suppose it's kind of like parenting where, each day, each shift or whatever could be long, but each year goes by really fast. So just enjoy each day. And I appreciate all the support and love from my family. So it's been a good ride.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Thank you for your service, Pete.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. You've done a great job, and congratulations on your retirement. Public hearings. We have a public hearing on Resolution 1-23 to partially discontinue a portion of public right-of-way for Sharon Lane, generally located northeast of Park Place Village, St. Croix Meadows, LLC. Oh, jeez, I was waiting for somebody to come up and say, it's a public hearing, isn't it? All right. So again, this is a public hearing. This is your opportunity. If you have any comment that you would like to make on this agenda item, please feel free to come on up to the podium, state your name and address, state your opinion on this, and once again, try to keep your comments brief and also try not to repeat comments that have already been made. Do we have anybody on Zoom for this?
I assume we do. Looks like we have about 4 or 5 people on Zoom, so I'm guessing that they want to comment on at least one of these items related to the same project. So.
Sure. Okay. All right. Would anybody like to make a comment? Anybody like to make a comment?
Nobody in here. So
Anybody like to make a comment?
I would assume, is there anybody on Zoom that would like to make a comment? This is about the public hearing.
Is this about the building project?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, is this about the building project off of Stage Line?
No, this is on Sharon Lane over at St. Croix Meadows.
I didn't late, so I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Okay, that's coming up a little later.
Okay.
All right, so again, this is on Sharon Lane. Is there anybody on Zoom that would like to make a comment on this?
That doesn't look like it.
All right. So once again, any comments? Any comments? Any comments?
Move to close the public hearing?
I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing is closed. Discussion of possible action on Resolution 1-23 to partially discontinue a portion of public right-of-way for Sharon Lane, generally located northeast of Park Place Village, St. Croix Meadows, LLC.
Move to adopt resolution 1-23.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing for ordinance 1-23 for a zoning map amendment from AR Agricultural Residential to RM-1 Multiple Family Residential and a comprehensive plan land use amendment from general commercial to medium density residential at St. Croix County tax parcel 020-1087-80-001. Once again, this is a public hearing. This is your opportunity to make a comment on this agenda item. Same things. Please make your comments brief. Try not to repeat other comments. Come up to the podium if you're present and state your name and address. And again, if you're on Zoom, just pipe in when you get an opportunity.
Hi, I think Kevin is on Zoom and is going to present something quickly.
Okay.
Okay.
So Kevin, if you're on Zoom, you could go ahead and unmute and make your
All right,
presentation.
can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
All right, let me see if I can share my screen here and get this loaded up. All right. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
All right, great. Well, I know a number of you have already sat through this presentation, so I'll make it brief, but thanks everyone for the time here. My name is Kevin McDonnell, Regional Project Partner with Lincoln Avenue Capital. We'll just do a quick overview on who we are. So Lincoln Avenue Capital is based out of Santa Monica, California. I'm the locally based regional project partner working out of the Madison area. Overall, our company is focused on exclusively developing affordable workforce housing throughout the country. To date, we've got about 20,000 units, and we have a vertically integrated in-house team. But with that said, we bring in local property management companies, local architects, and local engineers to work through us on the details with communities just like Hudson. And everything that we do, long-term focus is always key. So we always, with the materials that we pick out, the partnerships that we look at in the communities that we hope to be lucky enough to partner with. So just a little planning context. In the red here, you can see the approximate outline of the property boundaries. Just to the east of us, we have the Lighthouse neighborhood. To the south, there's some duplexes and some single-family homes. The Red Cedar Canyon townhouses are just a little bit farther to the south, and then Woodland Hills senior apartments farther to the west, and the Hudson Hospital just a little bit farther, with 94 just to the north of us. Here's the site plan. This hasn't changed over the past year that we've been working on the project, so nothing really new to report here. Just wanted to highlight that we're planning full landscaping along the east side, and really have designed the development concept to utilize the grade changes, with there being about 20 to 40 feet in elevation change across the site. So we wanted to make sure we were as sensitive as possible to the surrounding property owners. I did also want to note that the site plan does have quite a bit of flexibility as currently designed. As we work through the process, We anticipate next spring or this spring here to hopefully get an award of tax credits to move forward, and then to start working through a final site plan, and can work through things such as coordination with Stage Line Road, which we've had many discussions with the neighborhood and the city staff in terms of making sure we're properly coordinating to make sure we can bring a safe, sound development to the community. But overall, the development is 38 units and a three-story building with about 46 underground stalls within the developments. Here's just a draft concept elevation. Just wanted to highlight, the development will be very high quality, will be Wisconsin Green Built Home certified. Community amenities will include an on-site property management office, exercise room, and clubhouse for residents to enjoy. And next, just the need for housing. Again, the situation in terms of kind of the vacancy rates in the community continue to drop, and currently are sitting at less than 2%, showing a really, really strong need for additional housing. Currently, the average rent in the area is about a little bit over $1,200, and you can see in the last 6 months here, the projections for asking rents have really ticked up quite a bit and are expected to continue to increase throughout the next 5 years here. Again, what's really driving the need for workforce housing in the community is the average home value in Hudson is quite high. You can see with the top red line here, the average home value in Hudson is just a little bit under $485,000, and then you can compare that with the national average in green being just a little bit over, probably about $340,000, and Madison just a little bit above that. So Hudson's home values are quite high. So here's just some local job statistics from the Hudson MSA, Twin Cities MSA area. You can see that the two bars on the left are the amount that economists say that a resident in the community would need to make in order to purchase a single-family home in the Twin Cities Hudson MSA market. So at $96,000, $100,000, depending on the down payment that the resident makes. These are just example employees and from the community's workforce, and their average salaries showing that a number of different teaching positions, bank tellers, firefighters, police officers, pharmacy technicians. There's just a number of examples of kind of the need, and in particular with the new Hudson Clinic and the hospital down the street, we anticipate a significant need for workforce housing to continue to grow. Just benefits for workforce housing, starting with the construction. Construction of the development will support about 100 construction jobs for the community, and then just the benefits of providing competitive advantage and housing for the community's employers, help with obviously retention, recruitment, the ability to enable business expansion, and then having new consumers for local businesses, having residents and the workforce be able to live and work in the community is a huge advantage for the local economy. And then finally, just having a stable housing option for children, hardworking families, and seniors And then just touching on timelines, so I know a number of you know we've been working on this with multiple neighborhood meetings over the last year here. Had a number of different iterations on the site plan that we worked through with the planning department, and presented multiple options to the neighborhood. And obviously we went through the plan commission at the last meeting, and then our next step is to submit a WIDA tax credit application before the end of the month. And then we hope to have good news yet this spring. And then our plan would be to come back shortly after next spring with hopefully it would be a final site plan, and our goal would be to start construction by the end of 2023. I think we've got a few slides. Jeanette, I don't know if you were up there and planning to present these as well.
Sure. Jeanette Kunz, Lakes Area Realty. I've been working with Kevin along the way on this process and just had some local input. The first neighborhood meeting, we had several misunderstandings about the project that we weren't aware of. They thought it was Section 8, like government voucher housing. So along the way, I've learned the difference. I didn't really understand all the different variations of housing. But we researched, and in Hudson, we currently have these workforce housing developments, which are fantastic, like Mississippi Flats, Heritage Cottages. If you go to the next screen, each of these developments have, community rooms, playgrounds, and the Maxwell is another example on Maxwell Drive. That one's specifically senior housing, but it's fantastic. Beautiful finishes, but it does fall into the same type of program. So I just wanted to share that we have several of these already. Yeah, Boulder Ridge on Dominion Drive in Hudson. So there was just a lot of misconceptions out there, so we were just trying to educate. Then we heard from residents that if this project went up, their home values were going to go down. So we researched that and found that there was no correlation with that whatsoever. And we have statistics that we pulled from the MLS to show that. So that's what the next two screens are, and I think that was it. And then that just goes back to the current job openings that require this type of housing. So thank you.
Back to that last slide, I couldn't see that. What was your proof that housing costs didn't go down? Or actually, my love thought. It was a small print, I didn't see it.
Oh.
You just, this is not a question and answer between the crowd.
Okay. Sorry.
I can answer that, though. The statistics that we pulled from the MLS surrounding neighborhoods by Heritage Cottages, the Maxwell, and Mississippi Flats, and the line that went up for home values was 2.42 times the value since 2012, and that was consistent with everywhere else in the city of Hudson. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other comments?
Yes.
I am Christian Bickler. I live at 473 Stage Line Road. So I'm curious to know, you mentioned applying for tax credits. What are the tax credits based off of, and what are they awarded for?
So again, this is your opportunity to comment on this. This is not a question and answer period.
So there's a lot of talk about community engagement, but every time the community is invited in, there's no engagement with the community. How are we supposed to have questions that we have that I think are legitimate answered when every time I ask a question, I'm told that it's not a Q&A session?
guess that's legitimate. I haven't been to your neighborhood meetings. So at the neighborhood meetings, you didn't get that question answered?
No, I don't have that question answered.
Was that question asked?
Here's my understanding. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say at the neighborhood meetings that I went to, that question hadn't been posed, the ones I went to.
Had or had not?
Had not.
Okay.
I don't know. I know some of my other council members were there too.
But there were opportunities to ask questions of the questions could be
Absolutely.
asked.
Absolutely.
Whether you got that right answer or not, I don't know. But
The only,
All right, just for the benefit of the council here tonight, as well as perhaps the people that don't have that question, who would have that question, but haven't had an answer to it. Mike, do you have anybody here, you perhaps, that could answer what section 42 is?
I'm sure Kevin McDowell can answer that question too.
Kevin, are you, okay. Kevin, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So really how the tax credits work is the tax credits are the tax credits are based on the amount that we spend on the construction and building it. So what the tax credits allow us to do is to take out a smaller first mortgage, which is what allows us to rent the apartments at a rate that is lower than what the market rate rent is.
okay. So one of the things that I had heard previously was this site in particular was identified because of its access to the retail shops and the hospital, right? This is workforce housing. And that it was within walking distance for those that would live there. Nick, again, I want to express my appreciation for at least your engagement on this topic via email on some things. My understanding, though, of this process was that there was going to be some assessments completed by the city engineer that would identify improvements that were necessary to Stage Line Road to add this development of 38 families, which I would assume then means somewhere between 38 and 76 cars on Stage Line. But I didn't see that in the presentation that was just given as to what the city engineer came back with and what proposed improvements there are then to Stage Line, because if you visited that site, you would know that Stage Line Road doesn't have any shoulders, right? Every parent in here knows you don't let your kids walk along Stage Line. It's dangerous to cross Stage Line. So I'm curious how the traffic is going to be handled with this addition, and what improvements are planned or were identified by the city engineer, assuming that that study took place.
There's no shoulder.
Like, there's not even a turn lane right there. So when I come from the east, because my driveway is right across from this, I have to block traffic to turn left into my driveway because there's no turn lane for me to turn into. A turn lane was added for Coach Light, but that's to the east of this property. It is the one place on Stage Line that necks down from, 2 lanes each way, so 4 lanes, down to 2 lanes again. It sits at the bottom of a dip. There's blind spots for me on both sides because you got cars coming over a hill. So do the elevation changes for the units also include an elevation change for Stage Line Road?
There is a capital cost study. The agenda item tonight before the council, however, is a rezoning. That's the public hearing, and that's the question before the council. So when the
It's what?
council
I'm sorry,
brought...
I missed that part. It's what?
It's the rezoning of the property. So when the property came in to the city, when you annexed the property into the city, it came in at the lowest level of zoning that the city allows. So it comes in fresh with that low level of zoning.
What does that mean?
The only
low level of zoning.
The only item on the agenda tonight is the rezoning to, is it RM1? the proposed zoning of the site for this particular project. So you don't have the capital cost study in your budget because we're not at development review, although there have been improvements that have been identified by the engineer for the development of this site, should you decide at a future date to move forward with the development plan that the developer will submit. So I hesitate to jump in here, but I don't want to get too far afield. I want to make sure that the public has the opportunity to comment. That being said, the only question before the council tonight is whether you decide to rezone this from ag-res to a multifamily designation so that this project can even move forward before you for future consideration. You're not voting on the project tonight. You're just considering the potential rezoning of this property.
So Nick, if the rezoning's done, then if the council approves the rezoning, then what's the next step that has to happen, and how does that, what's the process that plays out then?
There are additional applications that need to be made for development approval. So a formal application needs to be submitted for the full-scale development of the site itself, which would come before the Plan Commission and the council.
Right. And that would have to be reviewed to make sure it's in conformance with the zoning ordinance. If, in this case, it would be RM1 if that's what's approved tonight.
Right.
So that the development plan would have, the development application would have to be submitted. So then once the application's submitted, it would have to be processed. We go through the process with the Planning Commission. Planning Commission makes recommendations ultimately to the council. As part of that, the review is of the capital cost study, which looks at what improvements, kind of have to be made based on the engineer's review, what's needed to be made for access to the site, safety, those sort of things. Now, but to clarify with that, some of you have gone through this development process before. We don't often, look at a connection. Now, how they may be marketing the site, whatever they're doing with that, but the requirement to provide some sort of trail connectivity off-site into a further location is not something that we can really do. They can only control what's on their site. So as part of this, the Planning Commission and Council can have the conversation is, do they feel that this is an appropriate site to put a multifamily unit, with the understanding that any connectivity will be presented as part of the development process when they submit their development plans, but we can't force a half-mile long trail to be installed unless that trail would happen to be on all their property. But with that said, if the council and the Planning Commission feels that because there cannot be connectivity provided, this is not an adequate site, that's fine. That can be part of that decision-making process. But just know that, if they're, what the developer is doing as far as potentially marketing the site or things like that to say it's close, within walking distance or whatever, we don't have any control over that part, other than saying we do think it should have some sort of connectivity, and because it doesn't, we have concerns with the site. Or we can say, well, there's also many other neighborhoods that unfortunately do not have connectivity as well, and so we feel that this fits in with how they've been approved in the past. So there is a whole lot of other pieces to this as it moves forward, and like Nick was saying, for tonight, we're not here to review a potential development plan that we haven't seen. We've seen a site plan, but we haven't seen any of the final details yet of how they plan to do that. We haven't seen the presentation from them to the Planning Commission, to the council, about we are going to have 38 units here, and here's how we plan on making them connected to the community, those sort of things. We haven't seen that part yet. We know what's being proposed. We know that there are definitely concerns from neighboring property owners about what's being proposed, but this is just one of the steps in the process, and we have to follow the order of the process to be able to do it. We can't have the developer submit a development plan when we haven't even rezoned the property to anything yet. So the annexation was the first step. The next step is what we're discussing tonight, is that are we going to rezone it to allow for multifamily to be there? After that, then we move into the next step of actually reviewing the development plans. Do they really fit there? Do they not? By rezoning, you're not guaranteeing that the project can be there, but if a project meets all the zoning requirements, you are saying that yes, a multifamily could go there. So it depends. Like I don't know yet, Mike. I don't know if you know yet if they're going to be asking for any sort of variances or things like that. We haven't Yeah, we haven't gotten to that yet, so we don't even know for sure what they're requesting, if it meets all the requirements of RM1, or if perhaps they may have some sort of zoning requests. But the council does need to understand that if you do change it to RM1 and somebody comes in with a proposal that meets all the requirements of RM1, there's not much we do other than process it, because they meet all the requirements. So, while we're saying tonight that we're not addressing the long-term development yet, because we're not there in the process, but what we are saying tonight is that if you do rezone it to RM1, you are saying that potentially if somebody comes in and meets all those requirements of that zoning district, that development will happen. We can't stop something that meets our requirements of the zoning district. So the decision you do make tonight, while it's not approving a final project, you are saying that you are okay with a project of this type going there at some point. May not be this one. We don't know for sure yet what they're going to come in for ask for. We're not sure that they can meet all the zoning requirements yet. But you are saying that you would be okay a project that meets those RM1 requirements of going into the site.
Yeah, zoning is about use. So when this property came into the city, it was set at ag res, which is the most restrictive zoning classification in the city. So now they've asked to change it, and they've asked to change it, and they've asked the city for approval to use the property for a multifamily use. So that's the consideration. And Aaron is exactly right, that if you change it, and then they come in with a project that meets the use restrictions, the zoning district restrictions and requirements, and their project will move forward. But I just want to be clear, you're not to the point of reviewing the capital cost study. You're at the point of making a determination as to whether the use is appropriate for this particular piece of property.
So I know you said you don't want to get too far afield, but again, some of my comment tonight will be based on the frustration of this process so far as someone who has been engaged. If questions were asked at the last public hearing or weren't asked at the last public hearing, that's probably the only one that I've missed because I had to be out of town for work. But again, Nick, I'd go back to the email you sent me in August that laid out the steps that would have to be taken before the property could even be annexed. And yet here we are, when we got our letter for this public hearing, it indicated that the property has been annexed. And those steps were: applicant for annexation, being the landowner and the developer, would need to approve and agree to fund 2 studies, capital cost study and a budget study. These were all things that would have to happen before the property could even be annexed. If studies are approved for funding, City of Hudson consulting engineer completes the capital cost and budget studies. Once studies are completed, applicant must agree to undertaking the capital contributions and public improvements. So when we talk about, because I feel like I've been to so many of these, and it's like, well, hold on, don't get too far ahead of yourself, we got to go through the process. But generally the process has not been laid out, and then when it has been laid out, it hasn't been followed. So I think there's a lot of people that are concerned that decisions are sort of, we're sort of being pushed to the side to say, you'll have your chance for public comment. When we come to make public comment, then it's like, well, we're not talking about that tonight. We're only talking about the rezoning application. But it doesn't feel like then we truly had a chance to talk about even the annexation. Because when I was here in this room about a year ago, it was, well, yeah, you can make a comment, but really this is a town issue. So we talked to the town. My understanding that the town was opposed to this entire thing. But through the course of the last year, we were informed then that the town submitted their opposition, but that the city went ahead and annexed the property. So that's part of, I think, the frustration for us as individuals that would be most impacted. And it's not about the type of housing, it's about the location. It's like you drive around Hudson, and there are so many places that I'm guessing are already zoned for this type of construction. Why would we pick a 5-acre plot of land that is at the worst point of Stage Line Road to add an entry point to a 3-story, 38-unit building?
You
realize how many cars that's gonna be driving through there?
Just, no comments, please, from the
So, I think and I understand that it is, within your power to evaluate these things and you are obligated to go through your process, right? If I submitted an application, I'd certainly want it to be reviewed. But it feels like, you've got one landowner, a realtor, and a developer that's sort of getting a red carpet rolled out. And you've got a lot of people who are trying to engage in the process and not getting engagement back. And that's been frustrating because there is a lot of concern about what this level of traffic is going to add to a road that already does not seem well designed to support the infrastructure needs of the existing community, right? I think that's all that I wanted to speak to, and I do hope that I'd encourage folks on this council to go to stage line, go to the spot where this thing is being proposed, and understand stage line road, and especially that section. Where it necks down right there, it seems impossible that we would force and shoehorn something in there like this when the existing road system does not support what we have in place today. So that'd already be a concern. So thank you for the engagement. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate the comments.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm on Zoom. Can you guys hear me?
Sure, yep.
Awesome. My name is Scott Snyder. I live at 20 Bristol Court in the Coachlight District. I had a couple kind of questions. I was wondering if you guys were aware that we did file a petition to try and enact a 2/3 vote for this rezoning council meeting. We got plenty of signatures to enact that, and when we were looking to submit them, the city said to send it to the town said to send it to the city, and we sent it to both just to play it safe. I went to pretty much every person within 100-foot adjacent property to this new site or this plot, and had zero hesitancy for people to sign this that were against it because of multiple reasons. If you were on the east side of this property and it is a 60-foot drop down to where this new proposed site is going to be, your deck just turned into a view of a parking lot. You're looking 60 feet down, and I know that they're saying that they're going to put trees up, but I don't know how long it's going to take trees to get 40 foot before it's hidden and it's away. So your house, the frustrating thing for me is that you have one realtor with her one saying that this is not going to change property values. But if you went from a beautiful forest in your backyard to now looking down at a parking lot, that is going to change people's perspective when they go to buy your house. There's no way that it wouldn't. I mean, anybody with common sense would know that this is going to change. If anybody has ever looked at a house, you know that your surrounding area is just as equally important as what the house looks like as well. I agree with the turn-in that it is at a terrible location to try to widen or restructure the road. And also, a multifamily housing in that site does not make sense. There isn't anything adjacent to that property that would make sense to have a multifamily like that. We do have some duplexes and stuff like that, and we did bring that up at a different meeting with the builder, stating that, if it matched kind of the surrounding duplexes that we have right now, it probably wouldn't be so bad. But to throw up a 30, 40-foot building in the middle where to the east, the property owner to the east is not on sewage. So now does he have to go on sewage? Like, how does this have to, what infrastructure has to take place in order to make this even doable or possible? And I don't know. I am really against this project, and I feel like it does not fit our community. It doesn't fit where we are. And many people are nervous for the new traffic, tearing up stage line to add sewage to this location. and the whole 9 yards. So my first question actually is, did you guys receive this petition, or were you aware of the petition that we had sent in?
Yeah, and let me just address the
Council sent it to us November 7th.
Yeah, and let me just address the petition. So there was a petition that was filed in an effort to require a supermajority vote on the rezoning. Up until 2018, there was a law in the state of Wisconsin that would allow you to file a petition that would require a supermajority vote. That law was repealed in 2018, and the city of Hudson has not adopted an ordinance that would permit a petition to force an extraordinary or a supermajority vote. So that petition, well received and well appreciated, does not require a supermajority or an extraordinary vote in order to approve a petition for rezoning.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm sorry that I was unaware for that majority vote, but I hope that it speaks to the council that the number of signatures we had that are adjacent to this property were strongly opposed. And I just hope that you guys can hear us and understand us and realize that these are the people that already live here, that do live here. And not one person that I went to that was adjacent to this property was for this rezoning, was for a 40-foot building being thrown up in their backyard, and the headaches of the road work and construction that it would take in order to make this even plausible. So I thank you guys for your time very much, and that's all I got to say.
Thanks for your comments.
And I think real quick, just to clarify, the capital cost study was completed as part of the annexation review process, right? That study is available if you look at the council packet from November 7th council meeting. I also have a copy of it here. I'll leave it with you folks. I can make a few copies if you'd like. It also includes kind of the costs associated with the transportation improvements, a turn lane, things like that. It's a little over $125,000 in transportation improvements. About $23,000 in water main improvements, $41,000 in sanitary sewer, $52,000 or $53,000 just shy of in stormwater management, and then I mean a total project cost of about $349,650,000. So
that the developer would
be solely responsible for, correct?
Which meeting was that, Mike?
November 7th.
Sorry to jump back in here. My name's Scott Snyder again. I just had one other thing that I didn't want to leave off the table. As far as the development goes, to get this little bit of a lower income housing, the studies that they're showing on this is that the nurses down the road are making $30,000 a year. And that's not accurate. I mean, I don't know when they pulled those studies, but obviously everybody knows inflation is happening right now and pay is more. I mean, you're making $16 an hour at Taco Bell. So understanding who this is going to be for doesn't make sense to me. They say it's going to be cops and nurses and people of that variety. But and I brought this up in previous meetings when we were able to speak on this, that those people wouldn't even qualify for this type of housing that they're trying to propose.
You done, Scott?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Other comments?
Hi, so my name is Rydell Pahachik. I live at 473 Stage Line Road, and I too just want to say how much I strongly oppose this because it does not fit the right area. It's a beautiful community, single-family homes. It's already such a busy road, as we talked about. Our kids can't even cross it, so we have to drive them to friends. But we love that area because it was the township. We liked a little bit more of the country-ish type feel that it had. And this just really does not fit there. So we're not against affordable housing. We think, great. But there's lots of other better spots to put affordable housing. It's not on Stage Line. It would really impact the community and how it looks. It would impact, I think, people's willingness to stay or even invest in their own homes. So as someone who's looking to make a lot of investments to their home, I don't think I want to make those if this goes in, because I don't know if it's going to be worth it, because I do think it will significantly impact the community and how the neighborhood will look and the charm of it. And even if it's nicer and things like that, I just think it's really going to impact the community significantly. And in terms of the, investments that we would want to make in our own home. And that's probably about it, but I strongly oppose. This does not make sense in the location that they are proposing. And this would really, really impact the neighborhood in a negative way due to the traffic and the other improvements that would have to be done in order for this to go in.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments?
I'd like to comment, please.
Okay.
My name is Angela Olson. I live at 29 Windsorwood Path. I'm directly abutting this property. Our property line touches that property line. So the first thing I want to say is the developer talks a lot about the community engagement process. And we have been to every meeting, town, city, the developer meeting, except one when I was in the hospital. And there have not been one positive thing from anyone that is impacted by this. So every neighbor, all of these community engagement things have been by neighbors who adamantly oppose it. There have not been people there promoting this except for the one council person who came to the one meeting with us. We have asked lots of questions about it and haven't gotten answers. And I echo what Christian said earlier. Really, every time we try to ask a question, we're told next time there'll be an opportunity for this, next time there'll be an opportunity for this, and we're never given an actual answer. Also, the data you're looking at from the developer and from the real estate agent, they're obviously, this benefits them. And so they're trying to skew the data to make it look better for them. I am a part-time teacher married to a cop, and we do not qualify for that housing. We make way more than they say that the average teacher and cop make on that scale. So that is not accurate. And we also talked to 3 different real estate agents, not this one, one based in Hudson and 2 based in Minnesota, and asked them what having a property like that in our backyard would look like, if it would impact our property value at all. And all 3 of them said it would negatively impact our property value immediately. So I'm not really sure where they're pulling that from or how they're skewing that, but that is not correct. It's not fair to people that have been established in this community. We contribute a lot to the community. This whole neighborhood is full of kids. It's a vibrant community of people who are volunteering. We're investing in the community all the time, and it just feels like we're getting pushed back from every single person we talk to. We're not allowed to ask questions, and it feels like this just keeps rolling forward despite all of the things we've said against it. So that is what I'd like to say, but again, I'm adamantly opposed to this. I don't feel like that property is large enough or located in a position where it can support that many cars and people along that stretch of land. It's so unfair to the people who are living and working here already to do that to us.
All right, thanks for your comments, Angela. Other comments?
Yeah, Christian Goodman. He might be up.
Yep.
Here's somebody else. Oh, sorry. Christian Goodman, 56 Lofney Bay over in the Red Cedar Canyon. Sorry, I'm coming into this a little bit late. Mr. Bickler invited me and let me know that this was happening. I don't think anybody in the Red Cedar Canyon was notified this, and if they were, I wasn't. In actuary, I base a lot of things on decisions on statistics, and as I was looking at some of the statistics that I saw in that presentation, I had questions, and I don't know what forum we can ask questions and answers, but some of the things I would like to see would be, for example, just doing a simple Google search, I saw that housing did decrease by 0.9% when workforce housing went in. So if you're going to look at housing, you can't just look at, okay, houses are all going up by 10% due to the market. You have to isolate that part of the workforce housing to see how that's impacting. There's a lot of things that go into whether house values go up, and that's just one component. Has anybody looked at crime? Is there an increase in crime when workforce housing goes in the area? National averages and homes in Madison and national averages don't relate to me. I'd like to see what the costs of housing are in Lake Elmo, in Stillwater, in Woodbury, River Falls. So I'd like to see area housing costs, not something that doesn't impact me like Madison or some of the other things I saw in the presentation. So I'd like an opportunity to look at the presentation. And of course, their presentation is designed to sway you to promote their idea and just have some more questions on those so that the council can make an educated decision based on some of the things that were in that presentation. So I do oppose it. I won't go into the traffic. I can't tell you how many times I've driven down Stage Line Road in the dark, and there's a police officer here, but people wearing black things, and if you're not straight down the middle, you're going to hit people because there's no curb, there's no sidewalk, and I'm sure there's been pretty bad accidents on that road. It's a dangerous road. I don't let my children out on that road. And just an increase in traffic is a high concern to me, as well as the low-income housing. Workforce housing, I think you go down to 60% of the average of the income in the area. That's what type of people qualify for that. And I agree, police officers and teachers aren't at 60% of the median income in Hudson. So thanks for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Christian. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Yes. I'm on Zoom.
1 second for you on Zoom. We've got somebody at the podium.
Okay.
My name is Sam Krstić. I live at 677 O'Neill Road. I'm not directly impacted, on the Stage Line project or proposed project, but I live about 1,500 feet, from Stage Line, and every time I have to make a left turn, it's very dangerous. Stage Line is 35 miles from hospital going east, and cars are just flying, And when I have to make a left turn, it's extremely dangerous, especially now in the winter. I also bike when the weather permits, and it's very dangerous. I try to dress, with the very bright colors, to be noticed. And when the traffic comes both ways, past proposed, around the area where this project is proposed, I have to go off the shoulder, off the road, on the gravel, for the lack of a better word, it's a gravel shoulder. It's very, very dangerous, and I had a few close calls, So that's one thing. Besides that, there are many potholes. There is a dangerous spot, on Stage Line, a couple hundred feet from the proposal. The cap for the main shutoff is missing. I've been trying to bring it to attention of the people there from the city, from the water department. They changed the ones. It's been missing now for about 6 months, and that's pretty much it. I can just tell you, that it's very dangerous. And there is no chance for anybody, to walk, especially at night. So, well, thank you then.
Thank you very much for your comments. Other comments?
Hi, I'm Rachel Teese on Zoom. I live down the street from Angie Olson, who just spoke at 13 Windsor Wood. Besides agreeing with everything that she said, we are also concerned about the amount of light pollution that would come from a parking lot that would have to be lit 24 hours a day. And the amount of noise pollution from the freeway with trees down.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that it? Sure.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your comments. Other comments?
Yes. My name is Carl Olson. I live at 29 Windsor Wood Path. I am Angie Olson's husband. My first comment is, and I want to clarify because maybe this was talked about before with the tax break, but at the very first meeting when we were at the Realtor's office regarding this project, there was mention of a kickback or some sort of break because of the proximity to the hospital and the fact that people could walk there. And I want to know if that is true and who gets, is that just the tax break that we talked about before, or does the city get something from the state because of this housing being close to the hospital and shopping?
The city gets no tax benefit whatsoever. The historic tax credit, or not historic, I'm sorry, the affordable housing tax credits that you're talking about go directly to the developer. And they're used to bring the developer's costs down so they can offer the units at a lower price. But the city gets no tax incentive from this. We don't get, any sort of financial thing like that. So, as far as the tax credit side, we really don't have any involvement in it whatsoever. We don't apply for the tax credit. We don't deal with the tax credit. That's completely outside of the city. So, as I said before, what the developer may be saying about accessibility to things like the hospital, I don't know, as far as, how they're trying to sell that. But if it's being used for a tax credit, I would assume that tax credit issuing authority, which I would assume in this case would be through the state of Wisconsin, is going to verify that all their information is correct before they're going to allow them to access any sort of tax credit. So if they're making claims about access and things like that to those sort of things like a hospital, then my assumption is that the state of Wisconsin will verify that before they would issue any sort of tax credit.
Well, then my feeling is that everyone on the council ought to be quite interested in wondering why the developer would be telling people that in the first case. And second of all, my other concern is the light and noise that we're going to have in our backyard. Right now, I get to look down at a pond with deer around it, all kinds of wildlife, and instead I'm going to be looking down at a parking lot. And I was assured by the developer before, well, we'll put special lights up with shades on them so you won't have light shining directly into your windows and everything. And that is absolutely doesn't matter to me. The fact is I'm going to be looking down on brightly lit vehicles driving in at all kinds of times at night, the parking lot being lit up, noise. Again, I'm a retired police officer. I know the people that go along with this kind of place, and I also know what they do in the parking lots, and I also know how loud they are and the the disregard for other people's things. And then again, also as a former law enforcement officer of 24 years, I also know what stage line is like, and I refuse to allow my children, as they grew up, to ever set foot on that road. Unfortunately, we kept being told that there would be sidewalks going in, and that never happened, which is another lie from the city all along that we've lived here. But other than that, I think adding anywhere from 38 to 76 more vehicles on that road, even with some extra turn lane, is not going to do anything, and I highly am suspect of that price tag of changing that, because that little bit of money is not going to do enough to make that a safe route. So I guess that's about it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify a couple comments if I could, particularly in regards to the walkability and path comment, if I'm able.
Sure.
So what Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority does look at is the amenities that are within a 2-mile radius of the site. And so they'd be looking at, is there a grocery store within 2 miles? Is there a hospital or clinic? And so that is what the state is looking at when they're incentivizing it. It's nothing to do with actual walkability, just the distance to those amenities that the state deems to be valuable to be near a workforce housing development like this. And then I did just want to clarify that all of those labor and wage statistics were from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Okay. Other comments?
I was just going to jump back in and say that we were told at that meeting, the first meeting, that the 2-mile proximity was with the assumption that the people that live there wouldn't have transportation and could get there, and that's why the 2 miles was important.
And in fact, it is not walkable because of all the reasons we just discussed.
Please, not from the audience.
So that's the information we were giving, that is why the 2-mile radius is the important thing, is that the assumption was that people would be able to get there since they wouldn't have transportation. So that I feel that's completely unethical to be taking any kind of money or allowing something to go through when we know that it is not walkable at this time, and nor are there any plans at this time to make it walkable.
Okay. Thank you. Other comments?
Yes, Christian Bickler again, 473 Stage Line. Kevin, since you chimed in, I'd be curious if you would give me the opportunity to make some comments based on your presentation.
Let's not get into it back and forth.
I'm going to let that happen. Kevin?
But okay, the question was for me.
Yeah.
No.
If you could
Christian,
stay engaged.
Christian?
Yes?
Giving you a lot of leeway here tonight, okay? Don't take advantage of it, please.
Sounds good. Kevin, could you bring up your presentation, please?
Yes, 1 second here. Which slide would you like me to bring up?
I'd be happy if we just ran through them in order.
Whoa, we're not going through the whole presentation again. If you have a question about the presentation, you can bring it up.
So there was a slide that indicated, again, I think we've talked a little bit about the average income in Hudson relative to the median or average home price. And when you interchange median and average, I think a lot of people don't realize that those are not the same thing, right? So statistically speaking, a median cuts down the middle and you have 50% of the values above that line and 50% of the values below that line. Average is always going to get drawn up higher than a median value. So I wanted to get some clarification on where Kevin was making references to averages and medians to make sure I understood whether he was using a true average or if he was referring to a median value, because those are two very different things, mathematically speaking. And on that particular slide, I'm just curious, what data or what conclusion are we supposed to draw from some of the data? So is it to say that no one can afford to live in Hudson? How are we all living here? Because pretty much every average income that was shown wouldn't be able to afford to live in Hudson.
So these are just all median incomes.
Median, again.
Yes.
And is that full-time and part-time?
This is based on the median data.
So it could be full-time.
I don't know exactly how the Bureau of Labor Statistics does, but I'm assuming they do their calculations in a way where it's projecting what the true median is for an individual working in those sectors.
And is it based on individuals or households?
These numbers, this is based on an individual who is a nursing assistant. The median for the Twin Cities MSA is $38,470.
All right, so we're not going to have a question and answer back and forth here. Christian, if you have a statement that you want to make about this, please feel free to do that.
Well, I think to the points made earlier about what's going into this presentation, I mean, there's a quote out there that there's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics, right? Because you can manipulate numbers to tell any story you want. And just looking at this, it would indicate that no one can afford to live in Hudson that works around here, which we know is not true. We've all managed to figure out how can we afford housing. We've also indicated, Hudson is a vibrant community. We all know that not everybody that lives here works here. That's part of being a larger metropolitan area. So I think my comment then is I urge council members to truly look at this presentation and try to pull back some of the layers of this onion, because it's manipulated data to try to prove an invalid point. And I find it to be rather frustrating. And then the other thing, Kevin, that you mentioned was that there were, multiple options presented to the neighborhood in some of these community listening sessions. Your elevation map and the 38 units hasn't changed in the year-long process that we've been going through. So I'm not aware of any other options that have been presented. So
It was, I know we did walk through that at the initial neighborhood meeting. I can't remember if you were at that one or not, Christian. I think you probably weren't.
Okay.
Thanks, Christian. All right, any other comments?
Yeah, my name's Cameron Zimmerman. I live at 25 Windsor Wood Path. This is in my backyard, so we have wildlife. Not a good area to build multi-housing, and we're against the zoning. So I'm totally against the whole idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Sorry, I'm just going to make one last one, right, Alpahachik 473. In terms of the amount of opposition that's towards us, I think we've all indicated that as we've talked to people, no one has been interested in wanting this in their backyard. And I think the city or this township or whoever is only required to send out notification to people immediately impacted within 300 feet. And so, you know, as we've tried to get this word out, the opposition, I just wanted to, you know, confirm, is growing amongst the community. So again, strongly urge you guys not to approve the rezoning. Please keep it the way it is. That's what the community, because my understanding is that you guys are interested in community influenced decisions, and this community is saying please oppose.
Thank you. Other comments?
I have one quick follow-up just to piggyback on what she said. I know there was one person there tonight from Red Cedar Canyon, and that is because, like he said, not one person knows about it there. And this greatly affects everybody that lives there. There's not very many people that drive to exit 4 and come back down stage line to get into Red Cedar. They come up stage line. So this is a huge traffic issue for them, and they have had zero input on this. They don't know anything about it, which to me is very telling, based on the developer not, and whoever from the city not making sure that they are knowing about this. And second, I just, again, very opposed, and I urge you to look at this and say, we're not ready to make this decision. It's apparent that there are a lot of opposition, and I can promise you from the couple of people that I've talked to that do live in that area in Red Cedar, they are against this as well. They don't know when these meetings are. And to make a decision tonight is very unethical, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other comments? Any other comments?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion is second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing is closed. Discussion possible action on ordinance 1-23 for a zoning map amendment from AR agricultural residential to RM-1 multiple family residential and a comprehensive plan land use amendment from general commercial to medium density residential at St. Croix or St. County tax parcel 020-1087-80-0001.
I think we covered a lot of miles there. So,
yep.
You know, the one thing that, you know, wasn't discussed was in the rezoning, you know, specific to the rezoning, there is the comp plan amendment too. The current future land use plan has that listed as general commercial, that property. It was in the previous comp plan as well. So for at least the last 15 or so years, that property was slated to A, become part of the city, and then B, to actually be zoned commercially eventually. So I just want to make that point of clarity too, is that, you know, there was an idea years ago that this would be a viable commercial property too. I don't know that to be true, but I think it's worth, you know, considering as you discuss and ask questions of staff. And
was that before or after Lighthouse was built?
I couldn't answer that question. I don't know.
Was Lighthouse zoned the same way?
What do you mean? Commercially?
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
I'm sorry, with an anticipation that it might be commercial.
I don't know. It's before my time.
Was there a prior owner? Was a different property owner at that time? Do you know?
I don't don't
But
know how
when
long
we
Mr.
set
Holz
the,
has had it.
when we set that future land use, so it's not based on the ownership, it's
Right.
based just on the review of it and things. So, I think the biggest thing tonight that the staff wants to stress is this is definitely a policy decision. Sometimes the council has things in front of it and it's more of a administrative, you have a process, you have to follow it, somebody applies, whatever that might be. This is definitely a policy decision for the council. If you feel that this is what's being proposed, which is the RM1 multifamily residential, is appropriate for that area or not. That's the decision you're really making tonight, is do you feel that that's appropriate? Then after that, if you feel it's appropriate, as you can see, clearly there's a developer, that isn't why we're doing this, which is how most of these projects happen, is that someone acquires a parcel and then comes to the city and wants to develop that parcel, and then we have to go through the process, which we have been going through, to get to a point where either the council has to make a variety of decisions. And as we've talked about tonight, we're at one of those steps, and that's the rezoning of this parcel. If the council feels that that's not a proper use, then that's fine. You don't have to redo that rezoning tonight. What we would recommend is that stays at that baseline agricultural zoning until another proposal comes forward for the council to consider, or if the council has a strong feeling about what they would like to see there, then we would move forward and provide staff direction to proceed in a different way to create a different zoning, for that area. But again, to stress, this is not a city-driven process or project. The developer, property owner comes forward, we follow the process, the council follows the process in determining if it's an appropriate use or not, and those sort of things. So that's where we are tonight, is yes, the parcel's in the city. It's always intended to have been in the city. And now it's the determination part of what the council would like to see happen there. What's being presented tonight is coming from a developer who would like to do the project, as you've seen so far, and you've heard the comments and concerns from neighboring residents about what that could mean and what that could look like. So the council does need to decide tonight if you feel that a multifamily is okay there, because as I said before, if you approve it while there's still other steps in this process, if you approve the RM1 zoning and somebody comes forward that meets all the zoning requirements, that's where it now no longer becomes a policy decision anymore. You've made the policy decision to make it RM1. If you do that and somebody brings forward a development proposal that meets all the criteria within RM1, the council cannot deny that project then. It meets the criteria, it will move forward. And that's where it becomes more the administrative side of things, if you're just signing off on stuff as we go, because they meet all those requirements. So you just have to understand that we don't know for sure yet what the full development proposal will look like, what they're asking, those sort of things, if it will meet all the criteria of RM1. They may be asking for some variances or things like that, and that's where it goes through a different process then, as we know with our downtown projects that we've seen come forward. It then goes through a different process for approvals. But, I want to stress with the council, while you may not be approving specifically this project and saying it's good to go forward tonight, by approving RM1, you are saying that you're okay with the multifamily there, and somebody may come in with a project that meets all the requirements, and that's what's going to go in then. We have no further say over it. Now, if somebody comes in, or if this project, if it's approved and moves forward, has some variance requests or things like that that need to occur to let it happen, that's when there's still some decision-making that could come into play. But you have to be comfortable with multifamily here to approve this zoning. And that definitely is a policy decision on the council's behalf.
And I know the next question is coming is, how many units could it be if it was RM1, right? Well, that's really dependent on your unit type mix and then the size of the lot, right? So we have floor area and lot area ratios in our current zoning code that discuss the amount of density that would be allowable, and that's really dictated by what product the developer or future developer would be proposing to locate on the site.
So the developer does have height restrictions, is that correct?
Correct, there would be height restrictions on it.
And then we would not have any say over whether this would be, they would look like townhouses or an apartment building. Is that correct with the zoning that we've got?
With the zoning, correct. You could request a different look or feel or something from the current applicant, but moving forward, if it wasn't this, no, you wouldn't have the amount of control.
Okay. If I remember correctly, the original proposal had more of a townhouse feel rather than a single building. Is that correct?
It was more of like a row home setup. It was kind of
Okay.
initially, I think, in that initial layout. I'd have to go back and look at it. I mean, that was, gosh, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Okay, that's not that different from what there is on, say, Crown Point Curve, Stratford Way. There are fourplexes on Brighton Path. What is the zoning for all of those?
I need my laptop. I'd have to get my laptop. My guess it's an RM of some sort. RM 1, 2, or 3.
So it really isn't.
Or it could be a PRD, it could be a planned residential district too, which then you have some additional controls in place. Like you can reduce setbacks, you can create larger setbacks, you can do additional buffering, you can create architectural standards. That's why the PRD is attractive to a lot of developers, is then you can achieve some higher density, but we can also get additional green space, right? So like a PRD would be like Red Cedar Canyon, a PRD would be Stone Pine, just for some context.
Can you just tell what that acronym is, PRD? What does that stand for?
Planned Residential District.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess the question for the council is, would the city be better served by suggesting to the developer that a planned residential district would be a better idea?
The challenge we'll have with that is for a planned residential district, I think the minimum lot size is 10 acres.
Oh, okay.
They're 10 or 15, yep.
Ah.
I think it's 10.
It's 10.
And you mentioned RM1, I know this is RM1 that they are proposing or requesting. You also mentioned RM2 and 3. Can you tell us a little bit about those? I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me go to it here.
Oh, there's RM1 through RM4. They're designed to provide sites for multiple family dwelling structures and related uses, which will generally serve as zones of transition between the non-residential districts and the moderate density one-family and two-family districts. An RM1 district allows for moderate density apartments and townhouses up to 3 stories with a floor area not to exceed 50% of the lot area. And RM2 allows for higher density apartments up to 7 stories with a floor area not to exceed 4 times the lot area. And RM3 is similar to RM1, however, it requires buffer areas adjacent to R1 or R2 districts. And RM4 restricts the maximum number of dwelling units per building to 8 units.
And would you explain the difference between Section 42 and Section 8 housing?
I am not the tax credit professional, so, I would have to defer to the applicant on that one.
Would Kevin be able to?
Kevin, you there?
Yep, I'm here. So Section 8 housing is really a program where the resident pays 30% of whatever their income is for their rent. So there are examples of, I guess, Section 8 housing where a resident may make $1,000 a month, and their rent is then $300 a month. There are Section 8 residents where they might make $100 a month in income, and their rent would then be $30. So that Section 8 is solely based on a resident's income versus Section 42 is we have rent limits that apply. So in the case of this development, the 80% rent limit on a one-bedroom apartment is actually quite high for Hudson. The rent limit is about $1,700, and the 2-bedroom rent limit is about $2,100, and the 3-bedroom rent limit is about $2,400. Our rents projected will be much lower than that, but that is the rent limits on the 80% units are quite high for the Hudson/Twin Cities area. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question about our attachments on tonight's agenda provided by the applicant? Under, I think it's page 6 out of 8. It's, headed Lincoln Avenue Capital Property Management Schedule and then density. And they have voluntarily indicated that they would propose having up to 38 units, but evidently RM1 density for that amount of acreage would allow 53 units. Are you seeing where I'm at? I'm looking at you, Mike, sorry. Can you find where we are on, it's the attachment under whatever item we're on now.
Yep, no, I got it. Yep.
Okay, so are we allowed to, is there teeth in that? Can we hold them to that, or would, I realize this isn't a concept approval, could later that applicant come back and say, actually, we do need to have to have 52 units, not 38, to make this fly?
Right, there would have to be some developer's agreement that we would memorialize that.
Because they're offering it at this point, but whether we have any ability to hold them to that density level.
Right.
Well, and we haven't seen a traffic study on this one either. I don't know if we require a traffic study on.
We would, we did some initial analysis based on the counts from DOT and what we had, or our engineering consultant did, but yeah, we generally put that in the developer's agreement when we get to that point, especially on something like this that's more complicated.
Sure. So in good faith, the fact that they're mentioning that and making that statement today, we would have the opportunity to say, well, that was what your proposal was, and that's for further decision-making later, yet
right.
In good faith, we would expect them to stick with that.
Right, and I think we would agree with that.
Yeah, certainly your approval of a development plan would include approval of a certain number of units that you're comfortable with
right.
as a council based on the information that's submitted. Even though they could do more, you have the authority to approve less than what they can do based on the site conditions.
Okay. Thank you.
Or jumping back to that, based on what Aaron mentioned, as long as they don't need any variances other than, would we create that as a variance that they'd need to do more?
No, so the control would come in is because they do have to do improvements. So that's what that capital cost study talks about. They have to do some road improvements, water, sewer, all that stuff. So we have to have a development agreement with this project. So we can factor that into the development agreement. In this case, we can still make that, requirement that you said 38, we're holding you to 38.
Yeah.
Correct? We can include that in the DA.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the capital cost study will take into account their proposed use of the site. In the development agreement, you can say that the approval is for 38 units or whatever that number might be. And then if they want to do more in the future, then they'd have to come back and get your approval to do more.
Yeah.
So you would retain that degree of control over approval of additional units. Even though there's capacity there under your ordinance, you still maintain that approval authority into the future.
Couple of points I'd like to make is, Mike, revisit what you said about it potentially could be commercial. So when the gentleman comes up here and says he's looking at a pond and deer, it could be worse than the parking lot and the light that was mentioned.
Oh, if it were commercial, yeah, because it was, for, several years, at least in this most recent comp plan update from a couple years ago, and then the previous comp plan from 10 years before that, 12 years before that, this property was slated for general commercial as a future land use. Now, land use is different than zoning, right? So, the zoning is more the legislative piece that dictates, this precise use, but the idea is a future land use would guide the city towards making a zoning decision based on what we had ultimately identified that property as being, or any property.
Right, so clarifying what we rezone it potentially to, what gives us more restrictions for us to utilize to control the property? I'm not convinced, and I don't know, that we discussed through the CapEx and the development plan, because this is just zoning, I get that. But the point of the safety up there, I don't believe has been talked about at all. And being in public safety, I've not seen it. Public safety is the plan commission member.
Right.
Safety on that road has never been mentioned. There might be another second look that has to go before we do anything.
From a traffic study standpoint?
Yep.
Like from the capital cost study expanding on
Because
that further?
if the council recalls, I know Nick, you would, as we developed the Atwood property, I held you guys accountable to fixing, and we all did, for the road, because of the school proximity to that property, and you guys spent a lot of money, that development, I shouldn't say you, Nick, but your development spent a lot of money on making it safer up there. Now, I'm not saying you guys did the magic bullet or anything up there, but it's a lot safer up there than it has for that development. And maybe we need to take a pause and take a look at the safety issue up on Stage Lane Road before we move too far. And then we can hold them accountable for the development of Stage Line the same way we did with the Atwood property.
These are not unfamiliar conversations that we're having.
I know, but for these folks that haven't heard that, maybe that's something that has to be addressed first.
So basically what we would do is require a full traffic impact study, is that what we're saying? Is that what they had to do with this other development, or would it be?
Yeah, it would be a full.
I wanted to just inquire as to my other Public Works Committee members. I know Dean Chamberlain, our city engineer, who's recently left the city for a different position, has talked about Stage Line and traffic calming. His concern was how wide it was actually for traffic flow. Does anyone else have any memories, or was there a specific traffic study done on that? Do you know, Mike?
I think the other component, and Nick kind of just brought it up, is that, the reality is with the annexation, we only have half, the north half of the road for that little, small little section. The rest of that road, the 2-lane section with without curb and gutter and everything else, that's all town of Hudson Road. Something that we don't have control over. So and again, I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, it's an excellent point, and I actually was one of the people that definitely was in favor of annexing this property for that very reason, that it becomes very difficult as Hudson grows further east. If there are pockets of land that are part of the township rather than the city, it becomes hard for us to make a cohesive plan. So thank you for mentioning that.
And I think it's a good point to bring up too. There were deferred assessments associated with the past expansion of when they did the large expansion of Stage Line further to the east, right? Mm-hmm. So when this property, as it came in, and as they have to pay, I think it's like $26,000 in deferred assessments from 20 plus years ago, almost 30 years, 20 probably, right? I think Red Cedar and all that kind of went in around 2000-ish.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sure.
Well, and it's interesting when you look at the lighthouse development. I was just looking at the Google aerial. You have sidewalks all throughout Lighthouse, and the sidewalks come out to Stage Line, but the sidewalks aren't on Stage Line, presumably because it's town road.
And again, before my time, but yeah.
So, I mean, that's part of the challenge of just putting together a plan for this entire area. Cohesive plan is that you're dealing with sort of multi-jurisdictional issues that don't necessarily allow you a blank slate to just approve what you might otherwise want to approve. You get the challenge of that road being mostly town, and we're trying to, look at how this all fits together.
Sure. Well, and stop me if we are diverting onto topics we shouldn't be, but with Randy, your comment about the work that was required for the new complex there at Vine and Carmichael, that was a market-based development. The developer came in. I mean, I admire what the work is our community development team does in helping the folks who want to come to Hudson and develop property to help pay their way and to pay for those improvements or those turn lanes or whatever it might be needed. How will the city address that, or how have we in the past when it is, like you said, there are tax benefits given by a state agency to this developer if this goes through? to help them, because it costs a certain amount of money to build an apartment building or a townhouse-based building. So the only way they can make the numbers work is to have those tax credits or some incentive that's provided by an outside agency, not the city. We're not cutting a deal, is that correct?
Right.
But do we still ask that sort of developer to pay full boat?
Every developer
They
pays.
have to, okay?
Yes, that's the way it has always been, at least as far as I can remember.
Okay.
For the last 5.5 years, and I know before that.
Sure.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, in the capital cost study, your engineer did identify off-site improvements to the road that need to be made to accommodate access in and out of this property. Now, it's not based on a full-blown traffic impact analysis, and you could certainly require that if you want to study what the impact of this particular facility would have on the roadway. But you do have some traffic improvements that are required as part of this. And as Mike said, just because this is a tax credit proposal, it doesn't mean that they get a break on any of the required improvements that they have to make. They get the same capital cost analysis as market rate projects. So there's no break on that piece of it.
And clarify, Mike, if you would for me. It came out of Plan Commission 5-0, strictly on zoning. Coming up next, we could take it, if we decide to approve the rezoning for it right now, or not, we're going to be able to jump in on the project and decide and help kind of direct it to the way it would fit better in the neighborhood.
Correct. Do I think you can solve everybody's?
No, we won't.
No. Most of them, maybe not. You know, you do your best.
Oh, I know.
I've seen that over and over again.
We've been fortunate to work with some good developers that have heard the neighbors, and they've really stepped up to the plate and took care of some of that business. Because of this one, I don't know. We haven't worked with these folks. I don't know if it's because of the credit or where their money's coming from. It doesn't matter, but
right.
I don't know how far we can expect them to address the issues to fit their project into it.
Correct. That's not a guarantee as far as what that can be. And also, multifamily is multifamily.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, big picture, it's not a huge project, but 38 units is still a good-sized project. And so you can only do so much with it. Mm-hmm. So that's the other part. So you've heard the concerns tonight, and, you know, even if the developer is completely willing to work with us, a 38-unit building is still a 38-unit building.
Well, even if we delayed this for whatever reason, does rezoning, we kick it back to Plan Commission, what are we gonna talk about? What are we gonna do? It sits there, and then it comes back up here, and then we have to decide again whether we rezone it or not?
Basically, I mean,
the comp plan, the new one says what? Future development for there is what?
General commercial.
Yep.
So, if the residents don't want general commercial back there, it would probably be better for them to accept this rezoning.
But isn't it commercial residential?
You know, this is a conversation with the council right now.
I think the other, well, I think from what I'm hearing is they'd prefer to remain ag reserve.
Well, sure.
Right, that are temporary zoning district, but. Yeah, I mean, I would think that RM1 would be more attractive than like a B2 or even a B1 would be your neighborhood commercial, which would be maybe a little less intrusive. But again, we have a whole list of permitted uses, all those other things. What generates a lot of traffic, as a neighborhood commercial use is maybe like a coffee shop. How much does that bring in? We've had that discussions in actual commercial districts recently at Plan Commission, right?
Right.
So, I mean,
and regardless of what we see as future use for it, somebody has to want to build that future use, which is why you're here. Somebody didn't come forward with a use that conforms with our current comp plan. Somebody came forward with this project, which is why we're here right now with it.
Sure.
So, that's always going to be the case. You can zone it to whatever you'd like. It may or may not ever happen. That's that's up to the, you know, to developers to decide if they can make something like that work there, whether it's commercial, residential, whatever it is. So it's hard to say, which is often why parcels like this that aren't in the city that do come in are based off a project, because you have somebody that says, okay, I want to do something now with this, and here's what it is. And that's where, like I keep saying, the policy decision comes back to the council, unfortunately, then of, do you like that idea or not? And that's kind of where we are with this.
It's also sort of interesting when you look at the future land use map in the 2040 comprehensive plan. So the red, which is the commercial, is really sort of part of the Carmichael corridor. It kind of swings along by the hospital, and then as it comes over toward this property is in red as general commercial. Across the street, the Bickler property, and I think a few of the others that are in the town, are identified just for future land use purposes as medium density residential. So, and I only say this because you got to think about making this all go together at some point. And so if you were to look at it to say, okay, well, it's commercial in the future because it fits with the Carmichael corridor, you know, does it make sense? Does this application make sense with medium density residential and what's around it? Well, the future plan calls for medium density residential across the street for those properties that are currently in the town. So it's not as though there's a request to turn it into something that's completely different from what's in the area. You know, you just have to determine as a policy matter whether it's a better fit with commercial and with the Carmichael corridor, or from a use perspective, whether multifamily is a better fit given your overall map and your future planning considerations.
Sorry, I just have, your letter to us states that
The-
is currently zoned
Excuse me,
agricultural
the
residential.
public hearing is closed.
It just feels like you're saying something that's not in the letter to us that says it's currently zoned agricultural residential. That is what is stated.
The
in
public
letter.
hearing is closed. Thanks.
Okay.
You know, Randy, you were talking about timing of this, you know, do we have everything in the right order? And I guess one thing that I think of, I live in Red Cedar Canyon, I know Hanley and Stage Line very well, where you tell the kids to ride your bikes and where to stay away from. So that's well received. And I've been there for 20 plus years and always would love it if there was a bike path and you know, a safer way to go up and down there, both on foot, bike, by car. But we've always dealt with this idea that that's town property or town road, I guess. And so we don't have the ability to put in the sidewalk, or there's land that, you know, kind of makes it tight right there. So, and again, it's maybe a question that can't be answered right now, but what are the possibilities with that street in the future? If I look at it right now, based on where the property lines are, we can't make that a 4-lane. We can't put in a sidewalk. It is kind of landlocked right there. So to me, that's kind of where I get stuck, thinking, and not just this development needing a sidewalk. We have plenty of neighborhoods with kids and people that want to use that. But we may be thinking that that's in the future, whether from this developer or a future one, but it may never come to pass just physically because the property doesn't allow for any expansion of that road.
You know, now that we've annexed some of it in, we're making that more of a possibility because we now have some control over at least half of it in portions. And that kind of comes back to a little bit where Randy was talking about a more detailed traffic impact study, but it also refers back to when Joy was talking about the Public Works Committee discussing that road in general and what you can do with it. Because I think one of Dean's comments with it is that it's probably actually too wide, and that you could narrow it, and if you narrowed that road, that would free up right-of-way to look at better pedestrian facilities for connections and things like that. Now, we would still probably need some partnership agreements with the town for portions of it, but I think if we had a plan that overall looked at that whole corridor stretch of road and said, okay, what would make sense is that we actually do narrow the footprint of the road, giving us some room to have some protected trail
On our
alongside of it. What's that?
On our section.
On our section. When we hit town section, we have to work out something with the town and try to figure out how we can make that work to get it actually connected through. But if nothing else, we could probably figure out, if you looked at a more detailed study of this road, a way to at least connect it in safely somehow to the Red Cedar connection and be able to get there and try to do that. But you still need some sort of trail along that road that's safe. You need to put in safer crosswalks in right now, because I live up there too. I know what it's like to try to cross that area, especially on foot. You got to wait a long time and you might get hung up in the middle. So when you talk about that, I think there are things that we could do, definitely. Now, that's going to be looking at a city expense moving forward. But you can look at ways to make crossings of roads like that much safer. And we've even seen that in the downtown, where you do, kind of bump outs and pedestrian islands, and you do the flashing lights, and you do all those sort of things. So definitely there are ways to address that issue there, but that would take more looking at this. And how do you factor that into the overall plan with it? But that definitely is something that the council can say is a need before we allow for any sort of rezoning at this point in time. Now, I'm not saying that's your answer or anything like that. I'm not trying to do that, but this is what's being brought up a lot, is that safety out there. And I agree that forever the conversation's been, we don't even own the road for big chunks of it. We can't do anything with it. But we did just annex a chunk of it, so we do have more of that road now.
Yeah.
And I do think that we could take a more comprehensive look at that stretch and figure out what can we do to make it more pedestrian friendly and safe. What does that cost look like? Knowing that Public Works Committee, Council ultimately are going to have to make a decision about spending that money.
We plow that road, don't we?
What's that?
We plow that road, don't we?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll ask the question, what does it take for us to get the rest of the road?
Talk to the town.
An intergovernmental agreement.
Yep, we'd have to work out an agreement with the town. We'd have to expand that intergovernmental agreement. And like I said, if we're doing it for a safety reason, I would hope that the town would be more than willing to work with us on this, to say that we're trying to make this road safer for pedestrians and everybody that lives there, to try to address some of these concerns. Because one of the things you don't want to hear in a community is that these are the roads in neighborhoods that we tell kids not to walk or ride bike on. That's a problem. And we all know that. I mean, we would recognize that this may be not the only area, but it's a pretty high density residential area that does have some real safety issues. So, I think it's very legitimate. What's been brought up is, can you take a bigger picture look at that road? How can we address those safety issues? What's it going to cost? And then, how can we then move forward to potentially look at some of these things that are being thrown out there. Now, when you talk about costs, we are going to talk about ARPA funds eventually, I hope. And there is some money there at least that could be used, if nothing else, to fund the study of what we need to do. And then after that, it would be looking at, I'm assuming anything we do is not going to be within our regular budget to address. We'd have to look at additional bonding or rearranging bonding, which, that'll be a fun public works, public safety conversation at some point, but we're not there yet.
I've been here a couple of years, and you, Lynn, and Mike, and that whole area up there, everybody that's sitting in these chairs has tried to address the safety issue up there, and it just has never happened, and because of the cost, to be honest.
Yeah. Yep.
And really nobody's spearheading taking that. And maybe this is the catalyst that starts that. If to make that road safe for all the residents all along Stage Line and coming in on it. I don't know if it precludes us
I think some
zoning
things,
it.
well, I think some things could be done without a great cost, just by striping the road differently. If you drive on Cooley very much, that got restriped this year. Dean Chamberlain and Mike Mraz designed that, so now there's a definite turn lane when you're turning left.
Well, I would
to go
pause
north
with
on
that
17th.
because that has not been the be-all, but I get your point.
Sure. No, well, I live in that neighborhood. I think it has, studies show that narrowing the road and giving more specific, here's where you turn, does bring some safety. And like you said, without much expense, could bring some more ability to have a walking path. Something maybe it would maybe not be as protected as a sidewalk. It's a struggle in many parts of town where we don't have sidewalks, for sure. But that is, unfortunately, a road that tempts people to go pretty fast. I hear you for sure on that.
I hesitate to bring in more road for us to take care of when we have plenty of safety issues that are not being addressed as it is. And we'll talk about that during the capital improvement item that's coming up. But yeah, I agree. You know, safety is extremely important. I've been on public safety for all the time that I've been on the council. And it's an issue all over the city that needs to be addressed, and it's expensive to address. And so when we talk about that later, that's going to be coming up, is how do we prioritize? Which roads do we prioritize as needing the most?
You have to wear a green shirt.
What's that?
To wear a green shirt.
Yeah.
We know your road, Randy.
What was that?
I said, we know the road Randy wants.
Oh, that's why you're wearing your green sweatshirt.
Are we saying that, are we dependent on the zoning based upon the hope that the road gets? I want to make the connection here somewhere, and I'm missing the connection as far as if we're talking about rezoning, or we're talking about rezoning only if the road gets.
It's not required to be linked, but it's a concern that's been brought up by the adjacent property owners and other residents of the area. So it definitely can be a criteria in the decision-making if the council feels that we should move to allow a multifamily
Criteria
development
for
there.
rezoning based on the guarantee that the road, I mean,
Well,
are you going to try to tie the two together?
Well, and that could be, yes. I mean, they're not tied together, and other than the sense that we're discussing it because it's a concern that, as a council, exists. The property owners are bringing up as a concern with allowing more multifamily to be going into this area. So it does not have to be, we don't have to address that road safety for the council to say, you know what, it's an existing issue, we know it's there, but we feel that this is still an okay rezoning to allow. But it also, on the flip side, it can be a criteria to say that we recognize that this is a safety issue there. We don't feel comfortable allowing a multifamily going in until we at least know if we can address it or not.
Okay.
So it's not a requirement, but this is also what happens when you have a policy decision, is that it's very loose as far as the council's, what you feel should be weighing into it, but we're just trying to address some issues that were brought up and that we all know do exist up there.
A little bit of the process is we'll go back to Plan Commission for final development plans and et cetera, is where we can suggest these things.
Suggest, but they've already,
to
I said
improve
the plan commission already was talking about the
just rezoning.
Yep,
We
that-
haven't
I know,
talked
that's, I
about
mean, so when we start talking about roads, I kind of felt like we're trying to tie the both two together, to that we can't rezone unless this happens.
Yes and no.
Well, I don't know if we can do that.
Happened, is
Okay,
where
well,
I was
good,
going with
then I am,
Yep.
You
It can be.
You can, but you don't have to.
Right.
okay.
So
okay.
it's, as Aaron said, that's
Policy.
that's probably not a great answer, but it is policy. You get to take all the factors into consideration. You could, it is within your authority if you want to approve the rezoning, if you want to deny the rezoning. You could also say, we need to hit the pause button because we need more information on traffic. And we want to do some more study, and so we're not going to take any action right now until we have more information that will allow us to make a sound decision moving forward.
If we push the pause on that, could we also get the information from the town regarding how long it would take, if there's any interest in some kind of agreement like that, if they're even amenable to that idea?
We could basically, what we do is just reach out to the town and say, you know what, here's what the council wants to do. We want to do basically a study of this stretch of the road. We want to try to figure out how we can make it safer, not only for pedestrians, but also just regular automotive traffic as well, because it is a very fast stretch, because it's wide. I mean, you feel no barriers there. You feel like you can really go, and you also don't see a lot of the housing until you get a little further up towards 35. So yes, we would try to get that figured out with them first, that we're trying to address
If
this.
that's the direction the council would like to go, I would definitely ask that we be very clear and concise in what that motion is and that recommendation, just because that's gonna take a little bit to put together.
What we would do is basically, if the council wants to see this, I think we have a good idea of what you're looking for. We would sit down with one of our consulting engineers and say, okay, we want to take a look, basically do a safety study of this stretch. And what we want to take a look at primarily is pedestrian safety, not only on the road itself, trail, separated lane, whatever it might be, crossing of that road too, because we do have.
Well,
obviously,
traffic turns with the blind spot on the hills, so too as well.
Yeah, and focusing on pedestrian, but we also want to address any sort of vehicular concerns that they see as traffic engineers, things like that.
And beyond, you're talking about beyond just this
Yep.
narrow stretch.
We're
of
talking about the
property
whole
that we're
stretch.
annexing, plus whatever improvements that were outside of those boundaries effectively over to, what's that first north-south road again? Coach Light?
Coach Light Drive.
Coach Light, and then, because that's where the improvements would start for the turn lane going in. And then this.
I would say we'd probably want to look at that whole corridor almost all
You'd
the
have to
way
look
up to the
at it
highway.
from the roundabout, from the hospital,
roundabout, I
all the
agree.
way to.
35.
So then the rezoning would be dependent then on some benchmarks we're gonna set then on what the road looks like?
No, I think we'd either pause or deny the rezoning right now and then do our homework.
And,
right,
but what are we
For us
looking
to
for?
digest that and then bring this back if needed, if we felt that was satisfactory.
And what are we looking for in this, the road study?
What needs to be addressed,
To make it
safety-wise,
safe.
CapEx up there, widening.
Is it trails? Is
slowing
it
in,
narrowing? Is it,
sidewalks.
what is gonna be, what's the benchmark that we're looking at to achieve to either approve or deny the rezoning?
I can't answer that
Otherwise,
because
I
I
feel
don't know
like
what
we're
the.
just going in
Yep.
circles around and around
Well,
and
and
around.
like I said, I think the issue with this is that we can't give you a specific because it's not, in our zoning orders, as Mike talked about, if you have this many acres and you have this much floor density, you can have this many units, you need this many parking spots. We have formulas for all that. But this is a more nebulous policy discussion on this whole area now of, okay, so we know what this area is like. We know what the current concerns and issues are with either traffic or pedestrian safety. We have a proposal to do a rezoning that would allow for additional residential traffic, pedestrians, potentially those sort of things out there.
We know what our future land uses are for the areas, the unincorporated town areas too, and which we would project traffic volumes off of those land use categories.
So the concern is that I couldn't tell you what the exact criteria would be, but what we could do is get a traffic engineer to look at it and say, here's how you would make this safer. Here's what you would need to do. What we have heard potentially is that you narrow the road, which then allows you to add some sort of trail or something next to it. You would have to do some sort of with the narrowing pedestrian crossways to assist with that, however that would look. And then you would see that, look at it and say, okay, this is going to cost the city X to do. If we do this, do we think it's going to have enough of an impact? Is it worth the investment? Can we afford to do this? And then if we do it, do we feel more comfortable allowing multifamily in here now because we've done these things? Or maybe the council decides it's not worth it. This is too big of a financial, impact, or there's not enough we can do because the town won't work with us, because we don't have the right of way. So we need to decide based on what we have right now, are we good with allowing
The criteria
multifamily?
could change if it goes zoned commercial. Wouldn't that be a
Right.
different set of criteria needed for
Well,
that particular
and
section of the road?
ultimately, if you make let's say in a perfect world, all those improvements were to occur, and we've got this great road, is it still gonna change the opinions of the neighboring residents about multifamily, commercial, ag reserve, open space, whatever it is?
There are other concerns that were raised. You did hear other concerns about you lose this nice, outside area to a parking lot, to lights, to whatever. Those concerns obviously can't be addressed by this. All you're talking about is the safety part of the adding people out there. But those other things, like you said, I think Mike said before, it is what it is, basically. If something goes in there, I'm not sure we can ever make everyone happy with what that thing will be. But that's also the nature of the fact that it's a parcel of land that is developable. It is basically surrounded by the city, or at least surrounded by development. And so we're, as the developer showed, we are in a very desirable community, as we all know. And so parcels like this will be considered for some sort of development at some point in time.
Absolutely.
There's almost no way around it.
I had a comment about the traffic study, a question which I'll let you answer, Mike, in a minute. But if we initiate a traffic study right now, the city would have to pay for it versus requiring the developer to do it. But on the other hand, if we did that ahead of time, so I would like you to tell me what you think that will cost, that kind of traffic study, safety study. But if we do it ahead of time, it will prepare us more for what we require of them as they come in to, approach their project for approval, and also would prepare us to what we expect of other people who might want to annex and join.
So basically, we always do some sort of traffic impact review of it. Our engineer always does it. If it's a bigger scale project, we often require the full traffic impact study to be done, things like that. So it kind of just depends
And we
on what
might
it is.
have to pay for that at this point if we haven't.
Well, in this situation, we can require the developer to do a full traffic impact study on this, but that would just be focusing on their development and what that would entail. I don't know that it'd be much different than what our engineer already proposed, which is basically adding some turn lanes and things like that, because 38 to 76 to whatever number of cars potentially per day on a road of that size really is not statistically a big impact on that road.
Right.
Now, doesn't mean that it doesn't cause additional concerns for safety and all those sort of things. I'm not trying to negate that issue, but I'm saying that doing a full traffic impact would be more in-depth. It may require something different than what we already have said would be required, but it may not.
Well, a lot of it depends on how much baseline information we already had. There was obviously a lot of work that went into the 2000s. I know that there was a comment about, that there's been conversations about sidewalks for years. This is the first time that, I've come across that, but, I'm not doubting that conversation took place in the past and that previous councils worked on it, and obviously they got something done because we did get the big expansion to stage line. So, I mean, and there's a lot of data that we already have at our disposal. I don't want to speculate on costs. We could make the developer pay for it.
But the only thing the developer would pay for is for the impact of their project on this.
They've already paid
All
for
the
it.
everything we're talking about, we're gonna have to cover.
Which they've already paid for.
Right, basically, they've already covered pretty much most of that. So what we're talking about is gonna be a city expense, and I would say for a study like that, 150?
Don't go, I don't know.
150,000, maybe?
Let's
I
put
hope it would be
Miraz.
less than
That's
that.
Miraz. Yeah.
Yeah, don't ask Miraz. It's just the last thing he wants to be put on the spot with this. But I would say that you could easily assume that it could be in that $100,000 to $200,000 range. It really could be to study something like this. Because you're
Depending on
asking.
how involved we want it would become.
But it's a big section. You're asking for a pretty big section of road. You're asking to look at what could we physically do with it to narrow it, still maintaining traffic safety, but improving pedestrian. I mean, so it could be expensive, but at the same time, all studies are. I mean, this is nothing new, and I don't want that cost to deter the council from looking at it if you think it's important, because, again, it's
But at some
something we all
point,
recognize.
the east end of Stage Line is going to be developed as well. So the traffic study was justifiable with future development alone.
Yep.
Not just for this.
Yep.
I don't see the harm in rezoning this at this point. It might even give us some security. It's just rezone.
The only other thing that Mike and I had just chatted about here is this process has been under some time sensitivity for the developer as well. I don't know if Kevin can speak to it on their end, but if the process gets pushed, I know that there's a tax credit cycle and they have to submit by a certain date and they have to have their entitlements by a certain date. So, tabling it and extending it out to some date in the future could have an impact on whether or not this project even moves forward. Again, from a policy perspective, maybe not at the top of your list for considerations, but, certainly worthy of thinking about as you're making your decision.
Yeah, I can confirm that there is the tax credit cycle deadline is January 27th is the due date. So if it did push, we would not have the ability to move forward.
Unfortunately, the city doesn't operate on everybody else's time frame. We do what we have to do that makes sense, not on a developer's dime. It's not our purview.
So it's your pleasure. Anybody?
I'll move we adopt ordinance 1-23.
Got a motion, is there a second? All right, no second.
I'll
Okay.
second it. I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second, discussion.
Do we need to suspend the rules first? No? For an ordinance?
I have no idea. He's thrown me off so much I don't know now. Told me I can and can't do it, so.
You do have to suspend the rules, yes.
Oh, well, we don't have to suspend the rules. We could have an
First
individual
reading?
vote this time and then bring it back for,
I think if that's the case, you're basically doing what would be a denial for the most part, because I don't think that would give the time for the application for the tax credits.
I'll withdraw my motion.
All right, motion's been withdrawn. Is there a motion?
Move to suspend the rules?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second to suspend the rules, roll call.
She's probably asleep.
Oh, I have to, sorry, I gotta let her on mute. Once the public hearing was over, I froze everybody. Sorry, Becky, that's me.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Morissette?
Yes.
Wakefield?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Kennedy?
Yes.
Bruck?
Yes.
Hall?
yes.
Rules are suspended, or motions approved, rules are suspended.
Now move to adopt ordinance 1-23.
And I will second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve, discussion.
I'd like to make another comment. I live very near Section 8 housing, 100 yards from my back door probably, and actually, different from some folks here tonight, it was there when I moved in. Those apartments were there, and that was the house I could afford, and I have stayed there because I like the neighborhood. So take that for what it's worth. Everything has been fine except for occasional mischief once in a while. A few years ago, a couple of young kids jumping the fence, things like that, but that could happen in any family, any neighborhood. So I've had that experience of living near subsidized housing, low-income housing, and have not had an issue with that. The other experience that I've had is when I moved into that neighborhood, the street that I lived on, 17th and Laurel, did not connect with Grandview. And all of you are familiar with the Grandview and Stone Pine development, all that came after I moved in there. So that was a big change, brought a lot of traffic into my neighborhood. It's a wonderful development, an important part of Hudson. You look at it now and you can't imagine Hudson without it. But that change does happen. It's not necessarily always easy, but I do believe that people do have the right to develop their property, and there is a property owner that would like to make some use of this property, and I do think it will bring some benefit and housing to Hudson, and that change happens. So I know it's not easy to see that and to see that change, but those are just my personal experiences, wanted to share.
Thank you.
And just briefly, it does not go unnoticed to me for you residents that I will bring this up continually in Plan Commission as it moves forward.
Well, and it should be brought up to public safety as well for,
Yes.
I mean, they've identified some issues with the current, but, and those need to be addressed as well. But we need the housing in Hudson.
You look like you're going to say something, Sarah.
I was just good. I wanted to, Councilmember Morissette, you brought up the topic of it potentially going to commercial zoning, and I know Mike Johnson did as well. And I do think that this would be a better alternative to, say, a strip mall, a gas station, that did fall within our comprehensive plan. So I do think this is a better alternative for the neighborhood.
It certainly fits the neighborhood better. Mm-hmm.
And again, my comment is, 23 years ago when I moved in, there's a lot of places that I would like if it would stay park-like and trees and whatever. And now I look over in my neighbor's yard. And that's unfortunate, but that's because I don't own that whole area. Someone else did. So while I appreciate everything that everyone said tonight, the idea that, that I really don't like the not in my backyard, because it's actually not in your backyard, it's in someone else's yard. But that being said, I think these ideas of the pedestrian and turn lanes are something that really need to be carried through from all of us on this, because it is not just this new development gets all the new sidewalks and turn lanes, but it's for the safety of, all of our kids need to be as safe, or adults too, that if this new development would go in, we'd all benefit from that. But I think we do need to, back to your comment, Lynn, we can't really tie the two together, approve it with all these stipulations, but I think we can hold ourselves accountable if it is approved as residential, that we keep on the different committees to tie those improvements together.
Anybody else? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. So we're still on public hearings.
This one's a little easier. Can we take a 5-minute recess?
Sure. We're going to take a 5-minute recess.
Hello?
Okay.
We are back from recess. Did I announce this yet?
No.
Yep. Public hearing on ordinance 2-23 for a zoning map amendment from RM1-1 multiple family residential to R2 two-family residential at 1531 and 1535 Namacoggin Street, Team Johnson Real Estate. Once again, this is a public hearing for those of you who are still with us. And it's your opportunity to weigh in on, give us your opinion on this agenda item. Please identify yourself, try to keep it brief, and try not to repeat anything other people might say. Having said all of that, is there anybody that would like to make a comment? Anybody that would like to make a comment?
Is there anybody still on Zoom?
There's two people there, but I don't think they want to comment about this one.
Anybody that would like to make a comment?
Move to close the hearing.
Second.
Motion and second to close the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Public hearing is closed. Discussion possible action on ordinance 2-23 for a zoning map amendment from RM1 multiple family residential to R2 two-family residential at 1531 and 1535 Namacoggin Street, Team Johnson Real Estate.
I think this was a lot easier. It's similar to what's out there currently. It's a twin home project. They hosted a neighborhood meeting on September 15th. No neighboring property owners attended or made comment. Plan Commission recommends approval.
Move to suspend the rules.
I'll second that.
Motion second to suspend the rules. Roll call.
Morissette,
Yes.
Wakefield,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Yes.
Brooke,
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Motion's approved. Rules are suspended.
Move to adopt ordinance number 2-23.
I'll second that.
Motion second to adopt. Any discussion? All those in I'm sorry. Motion second, yeah, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Consent agenda.
Okay. Approve the meeting minutes from December 5th, 2022 regular council meeting. Approve the claims in the amount of $5,487,435.14. Approve a conditional use permit 6-month follow-up review for Hudson School District electronic message display sign at 1501 Vine Street, Hudson School District. Approve secondhand article dealer, secondhand jewelry dealer. Approve resolution 3-22 to accept a portion of Ward Avenue and utilities. Approve resolution number 2-23 to accept a portion of Annabelle Way and the utilities. Approve purchase of new portable radios. Approve the 2023 Lakefront Park concessions agreement between St. Croix Snack Shack and the City of Hudson. Approve the architectural and engineering services proposal from Cedar Corporation for the Public Works Facility. And approve the 2023 Hot Air Fair event.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion second to approve consent agenda. Roll call.
Morissette,
Yes.
Wakefield,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Kennedy,
Yes.
Brooke,
Yes.
Hall.
Yes.
Motion's approved. Consent agenda is approved. Discussion and possible action on use of ARPA funds.
So it's been a while. We've been talking about this off and on since we found out we were getting the money. And so basically, as a summary, the city is getting roughly $1.4 million, almost 1.5 actually, in American Rescue Plan Act funding. If you remember, and somewhere even on the council when we first got this, there was a ton of restrictions to start with, and it's slowly beginning easier and easier, basically to the point now where pretty much as long as we follow any statutory bidding requirements and things like that, we can pretty much use it for most any eligible city expenditure. So it's gotten a lot easier from what we initially thought. Basically, the only thing the council has done so far is approve some funding for public safety, which I have detailed there. We had approved new turnout gear and some other miscellaneous equipment for the fire department. We had approved when we had to relocate off the old fire hall, the emergency siren that we put down in Lakefront Park. So we actually have some better notification, especially in the marina area and things like that. And then when we did the traffic cameras. So we did approve that funding already. That money's been spent and purchased basically for the most part. But then after that, we've kind of had an ever slightly evolving list of staff requested funds. The big one from that was the splash pad at White Camp Park. We have upped that price. We originally were at 300,000, but we think 400 is probably a little more realistic, but we won't know for sure until we go for bids. We did have some IT things. One of the things that, as we kind of went through COVID and realized is that we probably had some technology infrastructure concerns that we needed to address, especially with remote work and things like that. And so with that, we have a new server, a new emergency backup system, and then it's called a managed services system, which is an annual expense that helps us keep a better track of all of our things out there when they're not just plugged into the system in the office anymore, especially also when we have more buildings in different locations too, that we have computers and things like that. So we have a 3-year phase into that. It's basically about $34,000 a year for that service. So our plan is we'll pay 100% of it year 1, half of it year 2, a quarter of it year 3. By year 4, it'll just be in our levy by that time. Gives us time to kind of ease into it. That's nothing really new. We've talked about this before. The new one in there is the transit side of things. We have been, as we know, we were all a little surprised when the state told us, well, yeah, we want to do it, but you got to wait a year to get it, which we found very frustrating because we went through their process. We basically sent them notice in December after the council approved moving forward with this. We got the notice from them saying, okay, great, it's January, you're good. Now you can apply in November and we'll work it out in November. Well, why couldn't we have done it last November? But we can't help that. That's nothing we could do about it, but it's a little frustrating. So with that, we still have 2023 where we won't have a transit service in place. We sat down with the county and talked about where they see their biggest needs, because right now the county does, through their area agency on aging and things like that, offer this service in a limited capacity to the elderly and disabled. And so we identified a third party that actually read about the article in the paper, whose sister lives in town, and they offer this service in a number of communities for elderly and disabled clients to get them around. So we sat down with the county and said, okay, so we can't do a full-blown transit system at this time because we can't. We have to, abide by the state federal funding timing. What are your needs with your service? Well, their service operates kind of limited hours, things like that, and they get a lot of requests that are off those hours on the weekends and things. So we sat down with this third-party provider and said, well, could you provide your service in the hours the county doesn't provide theirs? And so we have that kind of that backup of meeting needs that are not being met right now in the city. Obviously, we can't do it countywide, but in the city we can address this. And to be honest, probably a lot of the rides generated through the county are from the city of Hudson, just because we're the largest population center. So anyways, we're working with this third party. If the council is okay with providing some funding, we said 30,000. We don't know. It's going to be based on need. It's based on per ride, things like that. So all we're asking is if you approve this number, we're going to use this number then to go back. We're going to have a meeting with the county and this third-party provider. We're going to set it up, and we're going to say, okay, let's give it a try. Let's see how this goes. They basically charge the same amount that the county charges. So there's no difference. We'll have the same cost to everybody involved. It's just that we're going to supplement up to $30,000. Now, that may last us the whole year. It may last us till March. I don't know. I'm assuming it'll last us longer than March. My assumption is we think this will give us the whole year's worth of elderly disabled service. If it doesn't, we may come back and say, well, can we get some more money to continue? Or we may have to say, I'm sorry, we have to stop the service now. We only had this much funding available. But we think it's a good way to at least get transit started, get a third-party provider in here providing the service, because when we move into a full service, we do have to go out for proposals and things like that to get bids to provide the service. And we're hoping this third party will maybe get the bid and then continue on offering a full transit service in 2024, which includes basically rides for anybody. It's not limited to anyone at that point. So with all that, what's been approved is about $440,000. Staff's requesting about $700,000, which gives you about $1.1 million. There's still about 300 and some thousand left that we don't have any plan for, that the council can decide kind of what to do with. But also understand that what we've requested, you can say no to. We'll fund it in other ways. We'll have to, I mean, it'll be tax levy. There's no other way to do it. We do have to do some of these things. We just think it's a good use of the funds because it falls into kind of what they were originally intended for, which was addressing pandemic-related issues and moving forward, you know, having the infrastructure in place to deal with hypothetically the next one that could come.
How long do we have to spend the money?
End of 2024.
Okay.
Can we buy some Christmas speakers outside downtown?
We will be bringing back a proposal through Parks to address and look at improved lighting for Christmas and things, but that would be coming from, we'll go through Parks first, and we were thinking maybe room tax might be a good
With the
source.
lights that were broken?
Yes.
All right.
We're thinking room tax on that one.
I wanted to comment that hats off to the council that went before me. I was not on the council when some of the decisions were made, but there are some communities across the state that use their ARPA funds to start new programs that now they don't have money to maintain. And I know that you consciously made that decision not to do that, to, you know, spend the money on special opportunities or, you know, so I think that's been a good plan, because some communities started up some programs that seemed like a great idea, but now we don't have the ongoing funding to keep it going. I did want to ask for some input. I know, Mike, you've served on the Parks Committee, Parks Board for quite a while, and Mike Moraz is here also. Could you bring me up to speed on the splash pad? And because I know there has been discussion about collaborating with the Y and things like that, and where are we on the reality of that?
Who do you want to let's talk?
I mean, the simple answer is that that's been something on the park board as for future planning. It's been requested by a lot of citizens as a feature, and I know that it was on the. We've been kicking it down the road a little bit. I think COVID made us rethink about bringing a bunch of children, or adults too, I suppose, together at a splash pad when we didn't know what COVID was all about. That being said, I guess I don't know.
We did
a lot more.
The Y did have a proposal about it. We did talk to them a little bit, but I think the actual doing it would be difficult, because if you're not a Y member, the expectation was that the public could use it certain times, but not all the time. Because if you're not a member, you know, the members could use it all the time. Sure. You know, it sort of, it didn't seem like a good fit if we're going to use funds for the whole community when it could be limited hours for the whole community. And then the other part too is that in our long-range park plan, a splash pad has been in the plan for White Camp since that plan was adopted. It's always been intended that that was a spot for it, that that's what we would do there. It's always just been contingent on funding. Mm-hmm. And we got some funding, and it is, as you talked about, ongoing expenses. Splash pads, thankfully, are very minimally expensive to operate and maintain. They're not a pool, you know, with all those ongoing expenses and things. Honestly, we looked at it, and it would be a very minimal impact on our parks budget. Okay. To operate one. I know at some point you have to replace it, and that's a different story, but that's a number of years down the road.
But it is definitely something that the Parks Board and the director still wants, you want to go forward with it. It's an idea that you're excited about. Okay? Thank you.
You're the one cleaning it.
With respect to the unallocated funds of roughly 300,000, could that go towards our roads? Could it go towards offsetting the library funding? Are those all ways that we could save our taxpayers?
I would say roads, definitely. Library funding, give me a chance to work out our plan on that. I don't, I've kind of told us, well, maybe that was closed session. As we've talked about, I think there's a way that we address the library funding where it won't have the huge direct impact immediately, that we'll be able to phase it in over time so that our taxpayers won't have to bear that huge increase as we take over full library levy capacity. And my only concern with it is, while it's a decent amount of money, I worry about using it for the library just because that's an ongoing issue. I'd like to see us phase into the fact that this is a big conversation for the council to have at some point, but we're gonna have to pick a number for the levy for the library that we feel good about, that we think is operationally what they need, and then we'll lay out a plan of how we get there incrementally, but this could be part of it. But I do have a little concern about, at some point, it's gonna have to be on the levy no matter what. We can't, this isn't sustainable with it. So I would say, while it's an option, I would think that let's maybe focus it more on streets or other expenses that we know are one time for the most part.
Well, if you're asking for council impact or
that's what we're asking
feedback, I would definitely like to see this go to our roads then.
I agree. We don't have enough allocated. I mean, it's impossible to allocate enough to do what we need to do.
Now we got the other proposal.
Well, we have the unallocated of about 325,000 that we will take input on whatever the council wants to see with that for sure.
But we can't vote on that, can we?
Well, I would say what we could do is, if the council's okay with the other ones, approve that, and then what we can do is then bring back the unallocated. If your direction is you'd like to see it go towards streets, we can just take a quick look and say, yes, we can, we'll put it towards streets.
Which was my point, is
Yep.
that we've got an agenda
Yep.
item in front of us right now.
Yeah, we would bring it back and say, okay, here's what we'd utilize that 325 for, based on our current plan. Yep, thank you, Mayor.
All right,
That's
do we
correct.
we have a motion.
I'll move to approve the 707,000 request.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Update and discussion on the infrastructure maintenance reconstruction portion of 2023 to 2027 capital improvement program.
I grab this because I'll probably do a bunch of talking. All right, we'll try to keep this simple and short. I'll kind of walk through the capital improvement plan as it relates to infrastructure improvements over the next 5 years, and then open it up for any discussion, questions, so on and so forth. This was discussed at Public Works Committee at our last meeting. Great conversation. I think we spent about an hour and 45 minutes talking about it. But the framework is the council approved on the recent CIP the first 2 years, so 2023 and 2024, we're bonding $2 million to our streets. Okay? 2025, 2026, that bumps up to $2.5 million each year for our streets. And then in 2027, that bumps up to $3 million. So using that framework, our previous city engineer put together a plan based on needs, grants that we've received thus far, and just general discussions that we've had with the Public Works Committee and Common Council members. So before we go through the plan, what I want to kind of discuss and just point out off the get-go is you'll notice in 2023, there is a very large expenditure for street maintenance, approximately $909,000. This basically gets us close to being caught up with our street maintenance program as far as crack filling, seal coating, so on and so forth. So first year, there's a very large number. The next year, it's 300, and then after that, there's no more street maintenance because we are all caught up and we don't have to put money towards that preventative maintenance, so then we're able to move towards more reconstruction. Second thing I want to point out is in the plan, there are a couple of projects that are contingent on funding, alternative funding, so grants coming through. Hagan Street Bridge, for example, that one is in let's see here, I believe it's 2025.
Yep, 2025.
Thank you, Aaron. And then the other one too is next year in 2024, Dean had identified Commercial Street and Wisconsin Street next to the Associated Bank property that was recently purchased. There is a possibility of some development on that block in downtown, and he thought that it would be a good idea to piggyback on that project and repair those sections of roads that are adjacent to that development. Now, if that development doesn't come to fruition, there would be monies made available that we could move into other streets that are in need of repair that we've discussed in the past. So I just wanted to put that out there before we, have a frank conversation here. So what I'll do is I'll kind of just cover the first couple years because they are the more important, because the bonding is is a 2-year cycle, and these projects will be so on and so forth. There was a plow truck locked in. So in 2025 or in 2023, obviously I stated the street maintenance portion. Like I said, it lists all the roads there, all of them that have been, were paved new within the last 3-4 years to get them all covered up and preventative maintenance. The 3rd Street Hill project is listed in 2023. That we did receive a grant for that. That's basically repairing the road that's sliding down the bluff, going up 3rd Street Hill behind the old fire station. Carmichael Road signal improvements, which we did receive a grant for, so we're moving forward with that project this summer. The Safe Streets for All Action Plan, this is a county grant program that they're applying for through the state that we would be able to piggyback on and create our traffic calming policy that we discussed in the past with those dollars. So it would basically be utilizing some resources through the county, through their grant program, to do a full-scale toolbox that we have talked about in the past. So that's what that $20,000 is. And then Laurel Avenue, basically it's a mill under seal and overlay. It's a continuation of 3rd Street Hill, so past the Montessori, up to 11th Street, getting that stretch of road. So basically all of 3rd Street Hill, up the hill, as you go on to Laurel Avenue past Williams Park, that would all be a new street. That is the gist of 2023. Yep, let's talk.
I swear we approved Green Street on 2023.
Well, Green Street, we last conversation we had, we were going to do it in 2025 in correlation with the 11th Street project. That's what we had discussed. And then Dean had bumped it up to 2024 in this plan.
It wasn't in this last CIP, Randy. Dean Chamberlain.
Yeah, no, this was before you, Joy.
Yeah. Oh, okay, sure. Well, I can believe that.
Well, and I thought that, 9th Street, Fillmore Street, and Oak Street were on these lists, and now they've disappeared. So where do those fit in the project?
So those projects in particular, speaking with Dean Chamberlain, so a rough estimate is a block of street to reconstruct is about $400,000. Okay, so 9th Street, we're looking at about a $3 million project. Oak Street behind the high school, talking about $5 million. Fillmore is a different story. That couple blocks, $500,000 to $800,000. The 2 larger projects, whether it's the $3 million for 9th Street or the $5 million for Oak Street, what we're bonding doesn't even cover those project costs. So we would either have to bond additionally or just not do projects 1 year and combine 2 bonding cycles into one. But that's a conversation that we can have tonight.
This is maybe second, third time that this makes no sense, that all these projects have been jostled around and done this, that, and the other thing. Yours are gone. Why is that? Whose directive?
It's the funding. I mean, that's the bottom line, is that you can project in a 5-year CIP that we want to try to do some of these projects and things like that. And so when Dean started, one of the things he did is he looked at all these projects and said, can we apply for funding? Are they eligible potentially for grants or something like that? But, the bottom line is a lot of them aren't, because they're just not the type of street or project that is eligible. They don't meet the criteria or whatever. So it's like Mike said, we're only bonding for the next 2 years, $2 million a year. How do you do a $3-4 million project when you only have $2 million? We can do as many projects as the council wants. You have to pay for them. That's the biggest issue. And now, like with Green Street, we know some of these streets, if we can fit them in within the budget, we will move them up as soon as we can. And that's what we did with Green. I mean, at one point, I think it was out at 2027 in one of the CIPs. It went to 2025, and then after Dean reviewed it again and looked at our projects and what our timing was, we pushed it to 2024 because we could afford to.
Did I ask you for an email on the record if we did approve Green Street for 2023?
We can look. I don't think I've ever seen it approved for 2023.
Okay, so that was something else I asked you about?
I don't remember, Randy. I'd have to look. I don't think so. I think it was something.
But it's no different than the Green Street or Oak Street or 9th Street.
Yep, it's all the money. I mean, like I said, we tried to put together a plan for the council that slowly but steadily increased our funding. I mean, right now, we're at about 1.4 million a year. We're jumping to 2 this year.
But what doesn't make sense, Aaron, is the fact that and I get it, we're taking care of the streets and new developments that we have, but we've had other streets that have been on the radar for many years, and they're getting skipped over and redone over on, like Stone Ridge or, not Stone Ridge.
Because we can afford them. I mean, I understand it.
But is this the best use of our money? I mean, I understand Green Street is a mess. However, it's not used that much compared to other streets. Would we be better off saving the money and putting it towards one of these bigger projects?
That's a council decision. I mean, we try to balance it out. That's our hard part with staff, is that we're trying to balance out the fact that we recognize we have some of these bigger projects that we have to get done, but we also have all these little ones too. And with the funding we have available, we can't do it all. So we're trying to prioritize what we can do, with our goal, as you can see with our plan, is that by 2027, we're gonna have $3 million a year, and then we're gonna have to be reviewing these every year too. At any point, jump to 5, jump to 7, and we can do some of these projects, or do them as one-offs and we'll just do them. But at the same time, let's not forget, part of this is a new public works facility and a new public safety building. 2 huge projects that, as you talk about this, Randy, we have these big streets that we should have done before. We should have done the public works building 10 years ago. The police department was supposed to be in the library for how long, Jeff?
3 to 5 years.
And how long have you been in there?
12.
So this is nothing new when you take a look at the fact that things should have been done a while ago. They weren't for whatever reason, but we have to deal with them now. So when you talk about this, we're trying to get to the point where we have enough funding to knock off the streets that Joyce is talking about, knock off the green streets. We're going to get caught up with street maintenance for the first time ever after this year. We've never been that far along before. So we're making incremental progress to get to where we can just do these projects. And I understand, Joyce, what you're saying about, is this the best use? I can't tell you necessarily it's the best use, because we're now reverting back to policy decisions again. We're trying to make it fit with what we thought was a good financial plan, but how you use those funds is one decision. But the other part is how much funds we have. So when we presented this, we tried to show how we're going to build up to something to try to keep adding money into this. So maybe by 2028 and 2029, we're actually going to have $4 million a year. When you have $4 million a year, that's $8 million total for streets. You could knock off one of those big projects and still have money left to do some of these other ones. But we're just not there now with the funding side. But if a council policy decision is, let's not do green, let's not do a lot of these, and instead, let's do one big project like 9th, we can make that work.
But here, here's the rock in my shoe. You like that one?
It's clean.
There are things that that I believe that we approved, and then they're not getting done.
I can say that if that's true, I am not aware of anything that the council's ever approved that we haven't done.
Like. And that's the rock in my
Now, the hard part is that, you know, if you look at a CIP from 5 years ago, yeah, I get it. We do these 5-year CIPs on a rolling basis to say, yeah, we're going to do these projects at that point. But at the same time, when they come up, the council has never had the appetite to say, okay, fine, let's do them. Let's bond for $7 million this year and let's knock off 3 projects. The council has never had that appetite to do it, so that's why we've done it this way. And we're trying to make a plan now that we're going to get past the fact that we should have done things in the past that we didn't. But again, councils at those times made the same decisions you're having to make. Raising taxes in tough times. I mean, we all were here, you know, around, I wasn't here, but I was in city government in 2008 when that housing market happened. You couldn't do anything for years.
That hurt.
You couldn't do anything for years because you couldn't put that on your property taxpayers. People are underwater. You know, we've come out of that clearly, as we can see with their values, but at the same time, just because you can doesn't mean that it's palatable to you as a council or to our taxpayers. Just, you know, I got my tax bill. We were 1.9%. You know, the county was 15.5. If you're okay with being the county and throwing 15.5 out there, we'll do a ton of projects for you. I'm just saying, we'll do a ton of projects for you if you're okay with throwing a 15.5% levy out there. Heck, do the 5.3% from the school and we can do a lot more projects. But we came in at 1.9. Now, that's not wrong because we are still trying to protect our taxpayers and still trying to keep our, you know, our share of what we can do at a reasonable level within the means of everyone. But this is that hard part is we're trying to balance it out. We really are. And we recognize that we're leaving streets behind. We are leaving streets behind that are going to cost a lot of money to fix at some point, but we're trying to get to the point where we can do them. That's the hard part. We can do it faster, and we're happy to do it faster, but there's only one mechanism to pay for this. There is only one in Wisconsin, and that's property taxes. We have no other choice right now.
And I get that. I mean, quite frankly, it really irritates me that the state has just pushed everything onto the property taxes, and
they have a surplus.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Joyce, we pay property taxes, they go to the state, and they don't give them back to us. They distribute, it's redistribution of our tax that we pay. They go to other communities that they have decided by their arcane formula deserve more. And that's why River Falls gets $2 million.
Right, that's income taxes, not property taxes.
No, it's property and income and sales tax all go to the state, and then they divvy it back up, and very little comes to Hudson. So unfortunately, bootstraps is what we've ended up doing for all these years, and it is difficult. The thing I want to make is that while you would look at the surface street of 9th Street or other streets, I know, Sarah, you've mentioned that in Public Works meetings, you drive down streets in your neighborhood or your district, and they might look pretty tough. The difficulty is if we're going to go in there and do mill, underlay, seal coat, whatever all the phrases are, on an older part of town like that, it's irresponsible not to go full depth down to the water line and the sanitary sewer to fix the roadway, and at the age, because it's the older part of town. We love that part of town. It's part of what makes Hudson Hudson. But it costs more to fix those streets. And that's what Mike is saying in a nutshell when he's, and this information did come from our former city engineer. We spent a lot of time and a lot of detail on it, and unfortunately, we experienced in the last year painfully underestimated what some of this costs. I mean, this is what we're hoping it costs. Maybe prices will come down, but prices have been going up on most of the projects we've wanted to undertake. So that's part of the difficulty, is those streets that look so tough really need a very expensive rebuild.
Right, but these are safety issues as well. I mean, 9th Street, we've got a lot of complaints about people speeding on 9th Street because of the...
Yeah, and that's why I disagree with the delineators, because that further degrades the street, but that's another topic. I'll stay away from it.
One thing I want to stress with the councils, don't feel like you're the only one.
I'm not done speaking yet.
Sorry, Joyce. Sorry.
Okay, here we go.
Please let me finish. Anyway, in talking about this with my husband, he said, all right, the county had to go through a similar process on this. And what they did was, it was a special meeting about budgeting. They also looked at which streets which roads had the most traffic on them to look at priorities. They brought in a facilitator to facilitate this with, and everybody, it wasn't just Public Works, it was the entire Board of Supervisors that was involved with this, setting priorities and saying, all right, and I think that's really our job, is to be setting the priorities so that the staff knows what we want done and what priorities they should have. So I would like to suggest that we do that. What is it that we need to approve tonight in order for things to go through for this year? But I think the rest of this should be looked at more carefully by the entire council.
Yeah, I mean, there's no approvals that you need to do tonight. I mean, you approve the CIP, and when we approve the CIP, we basically approve the 2023 projects for sure. I mean, 2024, just because of how we're in a bond 2 years in a row now, assumedly because of the Public Works facility, we still have some input in 2024 because we won't have bonded for that. We're actually going to bond in 23 and 24, if you remember, because we want to keep underneath that $10 million bond cap that we have. Otherwise, our costs go much higher for our debt payments. So basically, we're locked into what we see for 2023. 2024 can still be discussed, but pretty much we're locked into that too. I mean, we can make some changes to it and all that sort of stuff. Anything beyond 23 and 24, completely on the table. We haven't dedicated any money to those projects yet. We haven't, done any of those sort of things yet. So, we can definitely go through a process like that. And I think the bottom line that's going to come down to is, what I was going to say is that we're not alone. Every city out there is dealing with this same issue. Everybody is dealing with it. Heck, in Minnesota, they're dealing with it, and they get way more state aid than we do for each community. And they're still dealing with their infrastructure sort of issues. And they have the ability to have sales tax. They have the ability to assess, 20% of projects, basically, to the adjacent property owners. They have all those toolkits that are available across the river, and they're still dealing with the same issues that we are about, crumbling infrastructure and things, because it's still such a big problem that.
Well, they have 17 billion in the surplus over there, so they're overtime.
They could send some our way, maybe. Yeah. But I'm saying we're not the only ones in it. We just have a very limited toolkit of what we can do. So really, when the council talks about this, there's, like you said, Joyce, really what you're going to do is decide how you prioritize the projects, and then how much you want to spend to pay for them. Those are really the only two options that we have at this point. We can't get creative with financing. There's nothing else we can do. It's basically, all you can do is identify which ones you want to do, and then how much of it you want to pay for.
But I think that this is a general discussion for council, because, and we've talked about this, Randy has suggested that we have a joint meeting between Public Works and Public Safety to try and merge some of these issues. And so this would, having the full council there would really make a difference.
Joint meeting, right.
And it's too late to be doing this tonight. So I'm going to make the motion that we approve the 2023 projects, and that we schedule a meeting for the whole council to discuss priorities and.
There's no vote tonight on this.
There's no vote on this at all?
You don't need to approve the 2023.
Right, but your other motion, I mean.
Yep, you can do that.
Okay, I will make the motion that we have a full discussion, and ask the city administrator to, check with the county on how they've done things, so that we have as productive a meeting as possible.
Yep, I understand what you're asking for that, and I'll figure something out. Yep, no problem.
All right.
And
Didn't you have some comments you wanted to make?
I'm tired, Randy.
So basically, I think the motion
Next
is
meeting.
that
Next meeting.
we have a meeting in the future. I may not be ready next meeting. But a meeting in the future where
In a
we
couple
kind of do
months.
what the county did, where they do a more in-depth review and identify how you want to prioritize projects, and have that conversation. And I'll talk to the county to see how they did it. I'll check with some other cities just to see, what do they use for their criteria and that sort of thing. And then the council can decide, kind of how they want to do it. And, again, like I said, so the conversation will be, how do you want to prioritize projects? And that'll be, a big part of it. But then, like I said, the second part is if you prioritize them, you got to pay for them. So you have to be willing to then take that next step and put that funding in place.
But one thing I've always thought about when people would say, we got to prioritize. Anybody on Green Street, anybody on the end of St. Croix Street is just as important as anybody on Grandview or a bigger street. You can't decide like that. Green Street is just as important. They pay taxes too.
So
That's
a discussion, presuming this passes, that's a discussion.
That's part of the discussion.
That's a big carryover.
Right.
That's exactly.
And I think this should be a special.
I appreciate you wearing green tonight.
I think this should be a special meeting so that we have plenty of time to discuss it without feeling.
So is the motion
No
to
public hearings.
prioritize, or?
The motion is to have a special meeting to discuss priorities and how we're going to pay for things.
I'll second that.
And do you
All right, we
prefer
have a
that it's,
motion and a second.
are
Discussion?
you specifying a non-council night, or could we incorporate it in a regular council meeting?
I'm suggesting that we have a special meeting because I think that this is going to be a lengthy discussion, and I don't
Is that
want.
part of your motion?
Well, she did say special, so
Yes,
I
I will
asked
make
as-
that part of the
as
motion
part
to
of
have a special
discussion.
meeting, yes.
I asked her that, okay.
Okay.
With this the only topic.
Anybody else?
What did you say?
What?
What did you say? You can't wear colors to that?
I'm going to be looking for a shirt with the number 9.
Find it those it shirts or something.
Well, and I'm all for that, but just to make clear, we're talking about, so we have a priority list or prioritize our decisions, and, being on Public Works, I kind of got into that beehive myself, saying, well, why did you do this in front of this, or what happened to some of these streets that we thought were on there? And they do have a system for prioritizing it. So it almost sounds, as we're discussing it, they were just throwing darts, and Mike said, here, Dean and I came up with this. It goes in a lot more than that, because we say, I'll just use green because you're wearing it. Then that money has to move from somewhere else. Well, then somewhere else has to be. Dean and Mike have a little bit more depth of the costs.
We'll be happy to go through
what's
that.
underlying it. So
I've just got to add this, okay? And I don't disagree with that. We have been talking about Green Street since I was elected, all right? And it was going to be prioritized since I was elected. And it hasn't been. So, and that's all I'm going to say. I get it. I understand it. I understand the things that go into this. But I'm really, really getting tired of listening to Randy talking about Green Street every time we talk about capital improvements and street repairs. So I understand that. And Joyce, you've been here this long as well. At least since 2016 and perhaps before. But anyway, that's all.
But we've been talking about 9th Street for a long, long time as well.
Sure, yeah.
And we've been, and I've, ever since the high school was built, I've been talking about Oak and the problems that we've got with safety behind the school. And so that's been quite a few years now, too.
So, and
the Fillmore Hill has been
those things
deteriorating.
need to get into the discussion, because we keep hearing about how all these other streets have fallen into disrepair since we've been having those conversations about Green Street and 9th and Oak. And so it is about prioritizing, and perhaps, and this is no reflection on you, Mike, at all, because last time we talked about this, somebody said, well, those are the decisions that are made at committee level. Well, then perhaps that's where it belongs.
And I'd like to say that I personally oppose having a squeaky wheel approach to our policy. So I'm just going to put that out there. I do think our subject matter experts, Dean Chamberlain, and, boy, I bet his ears are burning tonight. We've mentioned his name a few times. And Mike Mraz have done a great job at prioritizing and trying to maintain the streets. And yeah, we can all keep saying our favorite street until we're sick of hearing it. And I do think we have hard decisions. We do. We have a beautiful older town, and a certain part of the town is reaching the point that our sanitary sewers are intended to last for 100 to 120 years. Do you think Woodbury has any sanitary sewer that's 120 years old? I don't think so. It's all purpose-built with trails. We're different. So we have to accept that and try to move forward. And again, I object to the sort of squeaky wheel that if I just mention a certain street enough times that they'll get replaced. Again, I think.
So.
Well, but you look great in green, Randy.
Maybe to finish my thought based on what Mr. Mayor said there, that it might be helpful if we have this special meeting that I'll say Mike and Dean, but Mike, maybe we start with what is the system they've used in the past for their priorities. Again, not aiming at you like more homework, number one. Number two is we're going to tinker with what you think, but I do think we owe that respect to you, that here's my thought process, and here's all the tools and all the background we've had, and then we can go from there, rather than just a blank sheet conversation of who wants what street. So I think we start with what Mike's mindset is.
Yep. Well, and the county, from what my husband said, was the county started with PACER ratings, of course, but they also overlaid that with how much usage each of these streets got, and that was a big help in prioritizing things. And the entire board had to really work out a plan that they could all agree on, or at least get a majority to agree on.
And I would just like to add, Joy,
yeah,
clearly we have a system where the squeaky wheel is not getting the grease.
Okay. They're getting louder. We're trying. They're trying.
So Randy's quieter than things might
You better get used to that noise.
All right. Everybody ready to vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. I don't have anything other than to say Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year.
I hope you've had a good start to the new year, and hope that continues.
Can I request something for the first meeting in February? I was hoping we could spend some time talking about the comprehensive plan and how we plan to use that as our tool, and is our vision. So what is the intent on that 2040 comprehensive plan, and how will we use that as we make policy decisions?
Okay.
I just have a couple announcements. I don't know if any of you are aware, we had Eldon Fry from the fire department, our former chief, Jim Fry's father, who was also a member, had passed away. And an old-time city engineer that helped us with SCH, Steve Heff, passed away on an untimely death as well. He worked with the city for quite a bit in City Hall, doing engineering work. So two great people that worked for great departments in our city.
Thanks for that, Randy. Anybody else? Motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. We stand adjourned.
Pass my bedtime.